Hello, everyone, and welcome to a study session of the Cupertino City Council. Today is April 20th, 2021. Madam City Clerk, if you would please conduct a roll call.
Councilmember Moore?
Here.
Councilmember Way?
Here.
Councilmember Willie?
Here.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Here.
Mayor Paul?
And I'm here. Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And the topic of our study session this evening is the City of Cupertino's permitting guidelines for small cell facilities within the public right-of-way. And so this has been a topic that has been asked for by several members of the public for some time now. And so we are appreciative of the staff putting together an update and a study session on this topic. And I see our city manager is here. And so Deb, would you like to introduce our presenters for this topic?
Yes, today we'll have our city engineer, Chad Mosley, presenting the majority of the information, and we have legal counsel here to speak to any of the issues that might come up during the discussion. We have Marlene and Heather here to help the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Madam City Manager. And so welcome, Chad, welcome, Marlene, and looking forward to your presentations.
Very good. Let me share my screen. And do you see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Very good. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. As Deb said, my name is Chad Mosley, I'm the City Engineer, and tonight I intend to provide some background on the regulation of small cells and to show you information on the city's siting guidelines for small cell facilities. I'm going to try and be brisk with this presentation. There's a lot of information, and so I want to try and get through it quickly. State and federal law and regulations, including the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 and provisions of the California Government Code and Public Utilities Code, govern how local jurisdictions may regulate wireless facilities, including small cellular facilities installed in the public right-of-way. Local governments have the authority to regulate small cellular facilities placement and their aesthetic impacts. They also have authority to manage the right-of-way to ensure public safety and to coordinate uses. To reduce the aesthetic impacts of small cell facilities, the local government can set design standards such as requiring screening of facilities and having equipment coloring match the pole. This authority is balanced against state and federal laws and regulations that limit the scope of local government action regarding wireless facilities and small cells in particular. A September 26, 2018 Federal Communications Commission order placed even stricter limits on local regulation. These limits are designed to facilitate rapid deployment of small cell facilities and prevent constraints on carriers' abilities to provide a full range of wireless services. Key limits on local regulation stipulate that regulation of wireless facilities must not be based on health concerns, which means that local governments may not set standards for wireless facilities based on concerns over radio frequency emissions beyond requiring that those facilities' emissions meet the FCC's established emissions limits. This includes concerns about the health effects of these emissions. As a result, the city may not deny a permit application for a cellular facility based on concerns over perceived health effects of the facility. Also, regulation must not have the effect of prohibiting wireless service. Federal law also requires that local government regulation of wireless services not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of personal wireless services. This means that a jurisdiction cannot deny a service provider's wireless facility application on the basis that the jurisdiction finds the provider's existing coverage or range of services adequate. Local governments also may not enact a blanket prohibition on installation of small cell facilities in a particular area of the city or in specific neighborhoods. However, a jurisdiction could have grounds to deny specific placement of a small cell facility if there is a reasonable alternative location available. Short shot clocks for review of small cell facility applications. Local governments are required to act on applications for new wireless facilities within a reasonable period of time. The FCC's 2018 order set new time limits or shot clocks defining review periods for small cell facility applications. Under this order, a jurisdiction has 60 days to review an application for placement of a small cell facility on a pre-existing structure and 90 days for review of an application for attachment of a small cell facility to a new or replacement structure. It should be noted that the city's guidelines comply with the FCC shot clock, but the time period is being fully utilized to shepherd these applications from initial submittal to permit issuance. The City Council has conducted prior study sessions on the city's regulations of small cells in past years. At the May 5th, 2020 study session, Council recommended that staff analyze the city's existing cellular permitting guidelines to look for opportunities to enhance the city's aesthetic standards and clarify the permitting process. The enhancements to the guidelines were presented to Council on September 15th, 2020. Anybody who's interested in reviewing the information that was presented previously may do so by accessing the City Council agendas on the Cupertino website or by going to the city's small cell webpage. The city has 5 basic stages for permitting small cell applications. The preliminary assessment involves a pole availability request to ensure that a pole is available and that it complies with the site preference guidelines. I'll discuss the site preference guidelines in the next slide. The second stage, the initial encroachment permit submittal, involves the applicant submitting to the city conceptual drawings, photo simulations, and other pertinent information. The city reviews this information for compliance with the city's guidelines for constructability concerns and for aesthetic qualities and features of the equipment. Once the submittal is accepted, the city then directs the applicant to begin the notification process. Notification involves the applicant mailing letters to all property owners located within a 500-foot radius of the proposed facility location. Property owners are provided 21 days to review and respond to the notification. A representative from the applicant's team is available to receive and answer questions from interested parties. Once the notification period is ended, the applicant forwards to the city a list of all inquiries received, including the topic of interest and the individual's name and contact information if provided. The city reviews all inquiries and concerns and works to address any issues it can. Again, it should be noted that the city cannot deny a wireless project due to concerns over radio frequency emissions from a facility, as long as those emissions are within FCC set limits. The city does work with the providers to address aesthetic concerns. After the notification period is ended, the recommended modifications as a result of the notification process are incorporated into the design. The city has the applicant submit final construction drawings for permitting. Once the submittal is approved, the city issues permits for construction. The final stage of the process comes when the construction is completed. The city requires the applicant perform post-construction testing. The post-construction testing policy has been established to ensure facilities are compliant with the FCC radio frequency limits. Additionally, we've provided an opportunity for residents within 100 feet of the facility to request that testing be done within and around their residence if desired. Once the testing has been performed and the results have verified that the facility is operating within the approved limits, the permit is closed out. For reference, most nearby jurisdictions follow similar permitting processes. The city's guidelines for small cells cover the permitting process and many other aspects of small cell regulation, including site preference procedures, which are used to situate facilities in the least intrusive location feasible within a geographic area. It should be noted that the city's guidelines for permitting small cells are enforceable under the city's municipal code provisions that require and regulate encroachment permits for installations in the public right-of-way. City streetlight poles, which are used for small cell installations, have been broken down into 3 categories, from preferred locations to least preferred locations. Category 1, preferred locations, include those streetlights in non-residential areas within Cupertino. Category 2, less preferred locations, include all areas within residential zoning districts. And Category 3, least preferred locations, are those streetlights within 20 feet of occupied structures, 100 feet from school structures and public playgrounds, and 15 feet from signalized intersections, as well as covering a couple of other factors. The city's guidelines do not permit installation of small cell facilities in Category 3 sites if there are non-Category 3 sites available within 500 feet, unless carriers can show that there are no other feasible locations within 500 feet that will meet their service needs. This 500-foot distance was chosen based on signal propagation of certain small cell frequencies, which will be explained in further detail later. These siting guidelines work towards reducing visual and aesthetic impacts to the public and to residential neighborhoods, while also providing a clear process for locating these facilities in less visually intrusive areas. It should be noted that these preferred siting guidelines do not establish moratoria in any regions of the city, but work to steer installation to more preferred locations whenever possible. The City of Los Altos established a strict locations requirement for the placement of wireless facilities in residential districts and within 500 feet of schools, with very limited exceptions that were challenging for carriers to meet. Both Verizon Wireless and AT&T had submitted applications for small cells in restricted areas where they stated their wireless service was inadequate. These applications were denied by the city, and both companies filed lawsuits against the city in January 2020. Those lawsuits asserted Los Altos small cell regulations amounted to an unlawful ban on wireless services in the vast majority of the city. Although both carriers presented the city with information explaining why the sites in question were necessary to meet their service needs, the City Council found that the information was insufficient to establish that a denial would violate the law. Litigation is ongoing. The city looked at numerous setback distances for small cells for occupied structures before settling on a 20-foot setback to designate Category 3 sites. This table shows the percentage of all city-owned streetlight poles that would fall within a Category 3 designation at various established setback distances from occupied structures. As can be seen, each incremental increase in the setback distance for Category 3 sites results in an increased percentage of city streetlight poles that would fall within that category. If setbacks from occupied structures were increased to 30 feet, some pockets within the city would have no non-Category 3 sites. At setbacks of 40 feet, entire areas of the city would be devoid of non-Category 3 sites. In situations where all poles are Category 3, the city is not able to direct installation towards more preferred locations. Without this ability, carriers are provided more flexibility in choosing locations and poles in these areas. The following slides show examples of the effects that different setback distances have on available poles. This exhibit shows city-owned streetlight poles within this neighborhood. The blue dots indicate poles that fall within 20 feet of occupied structures. For any application located on one of the blue poles, the city would request applicants to look at other nearby poles indicated in orange to fulfill their network needs. At distances of 25 feet, more poles fall within setback distances and would be considered Category 3 sites. The city could potentially implement a 25-foot setback to address visual impacts and should be able to continue to work with carriers to install small cell facilities within Category 2 locations. At distances of 30 feet, pockets begin to form where no Category 1 or 2 sites are available. If a carrier needed to install a small cell facility in one of these pockets to meet their network needs, the city would have no Category 2 sites to direct the carrier to. Small cells typically use frequencies that have limited signal ranges, which require shorter distances between nodes. Many of the newer frequencies permitted for cellular use often need near line of sight and can experience considerable signal interference from foliage, buildings, and other physical features. The reasonable propagation distance for these frequencies is approximately 500 feet due to these physical features. The circle shown here is one such pocket where no non-Category 3 sites are available within a 500-foot radius. When setbacks are increased to 40 feet, entire regions within the city are lacking non-Category 3 locations. This reduces the ability of the city to steer applicants towards more preferred locations, as only a small scattering of locations are available. Should any of these sites not work for a carrier's network needs, or if the site potentially houses another carrier's facilities, the city could be forced into permitting facilities in locations that are less preferred than others within the vicinity. Locating in these situations could become more subjective. At setbacks of 60 and 100 feet, there are often no non-Category 3 locations available. When only Category 3 poles are available, carriers have more flexibility to select any pole to address their service needs. In summary, FCC guidelines limit a city's ability to deny wireless applications. Excluding installation of small cells at Category 3 sites could be problematic. Therefore, the city has devised a preference strategy that does not strictly prohibit these installations, but works to steer wireless facilities to more preferred locations. Establishing setbacks from occupied structures that are too large could limit the city's control and its ability to work with carriers in relocating facilities to better locations. The GIS application created by the city that was shown in the previous exhibits basically shows setbacks at various distances and can be found at the link provided here for folks that are interested. Now let's talk about distances between small cell nodes. The guidelines require small cell facilities owned by the same carrier be spaced at least 500 feet apart, unless the carrier can provide documentation with their small cell permit application showing that a closer site is the only feasible location that meets their service needs. As explained earlier, small cells easily experience interference due to physical features such as trees and buildings and require relatively short distances between nodes. Further, radio frequency signal strength reduces inversely proportional to the square of the distance away from the source. This is called the inverse square law. This means that as distances from an antenna doubles, the signal strength reduces by a factor of 4. For example, at a distance of 20 feet from an antenna, signal strength is 400 times lower than it is at 1 foot from the antenna. At a distance of 100 feet, signal strength is 10,000 times lower. For reference, small cell signals are typically below FCC radio frequency limits at 1 foot away from the antenna. The FCC's September 2018 order states that a minimum spacing requirement that has the effect of materially inhibiting wireless service would be considered an effective prohibition of service. Therefore, the city set spacing that reflected small cells' limited signal propagation, while also working to ensure no single carrier could space their facilities in a way that could result in the inability of other carriers to effectively provide services within a certain area. The exhibit here shows a hypothetical 500-foot minimum spacing scenario between small cells of any carrier. If small cells at the center of these circles were owned by the same carrier, all other carriers would be excluded from placing facilities in this area, which could be considered a prohibition of their services in this zone. A slightly different scenario is regarding the establishment of a 1,000-foot spacing recommendation between small cells from the same carrier. As indicated previously, the established rule of thumb for some small cell frequencies is a propagation distance of approximately 500 feet due to the nature of the radio waves and interference from physical features. The hypothetical example here shows 500-foot radii around 4 small cell locations. These facilities have been spaced out at 1,000 feet. This spacing requirement could potentially lead to areas that have less than ideal signal strength, as indicated by the shaded area on the exhibit. Should a carrier find that signal strength does not meet their network needs, they could request to construct an antenna closer than 1,000 feet to other small cells in order to provide coverage to the underserved area. In this case, any pole within 1,000 feet of another small cell would be designated a Category 3 site for this carrier. The city's guidelines call for 500-foot spacing between small cell facilities of the same carrier. The spacing requirement helps to ensure that wireless network needs can be met, service gaps are minimized, and there is available locations for other carriers to use. This helps to ensure that no carrier is prohibited from providing services. Now I wanted to briefly discuss the city's notification process and the established commenting period. The comment period is relatively consistent among cities in the region, ranging from 7 days on the low end to 21 days on the upper end. Cupertino has a 21-day commenting period, though in practice, we review all correspondence from residents regarding small cell facilities, even after the comment period is ended. The typical shot clock for a small cell permit is 90 days. Cupertino's commenting period uses approximately 1/4 of that time. The remaining time is needed by the city to coordinate with applicants and to perform technical and engineering-related reviews. The city has created an online resource page for small cell facilities that provides other relevant information and notification opportunities to residents and interested parties. By navigating to the web page listed at the bottom of this image, residents can find another GIS map that shows the location of all proposed, permitted, and active small cell antenna within the city. Residents can also sign up to be notified by email of any changes to the map that occur due to the city's small cell permitting efforts. Furthermore, the page hosts an FAQ, the city's permitting guidelines, and a depiction of the approved designs for small cell facilities on city-owned streetlights. And that concludes the presentation. I tried to make it quick, and staff is here to take any questions you may have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chad. And let's go to questions from council. In the interest of time, I'll be limiting everyone to 2 minutes for your questions, including answers. So I ask that everyone be concise and brief. Are there any questions before we go to comments from the public by a show of your hands? So I don't see, okay, Councilmember Way.
So just one clarification question. So the whole purpose of the Federal Communications Commission is to not to impede the service of carriers, right?
That is correct.
From that, that's the guideline.
That is correct. The FCC's 2018 order was initiated to help have rapid deployment for small cell facilities.
Okay, thanks. I just want to verify that.
Okay, great. Councilmember Moore.
So I was wondering, this, for instance, with Verizon, do they already have fiber optic cable line strung throughout the city that they're going to be connecting with, or is this all going to have to be new?
So Verizon, who's the carrier with the most small cell facilities within the city, has some fiber network, mostly on the east side of the city. And that network is continuing to grow and move westward. So the construction of these small cell facilities and the backhaul communication necessary to provide the wireless communication is growing. There will be new fiber optic construction throughout the city.
Okay, and then how is that going to be strung? So for instance, I was looking at one of the new locations in my neighborhood, and they have put in 2 vaults. They've removed the sidewalk and replaced it, and they're showing a what looks like a casing, the tubing going on the telephone pole to the top of the telephone pole, and it's not actually connecting to any wires. So I don't believe we have any Verizon fiber optic lines strung in this space in the backyards between the homes. So they would have to come in and get a line from somewhere, which is going to be up in the air.
30 seconds left.
Yeah, much of Verizon's fiber optic network is actually underground within the city streets, and they will be providing underground connections to the city streetlight poles for that fiber optic connection. At this point in time, we have no intentions of permitting any overhead fiber optic connections for these facilities.
Okay, so I'd like you to check this particular location out so you can see it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. That's time. Vice Mayor Chow.
So this small cell equipment, are they going to be 4G or 5G or both?
They'll typically be both. Some may be only 4G, some may be only 5G, but a lot of them are providing both.
Don't they have to specify that in the application? Do they get to change that without telling the city?
So typically that information is specified in the application, and actually a couple of years ago we permitted some 4G sites, and they have requested upgrades or updating that site to facilitate 5G, and so they need to have a permit to make any modifications to add 5G if necessary. And typically if they do modify the RF emissions, we require an additional activation report to show that it's complying with FCC requirements.
Okay, so any modifications, but right now on their website, I don't see an indication whether the approved permits are 5G or 4G.
Those are typically, that is information within the encroachment permit, and then when the site's activated, the activation report indicates the frequencies that are used.
Okay.
And
That's fine. And then, do we have any appeal process? I see that Campbell, I think, has an appeal process, city engineer approved, and then public
30
director,
seconds.
and then city council. Do we have that?
the city's appeal process does not take encroachment permits to city council for appeal.
So
City
it's the public director of public works is the final approval.
That is correct.
And then the many Verizon sites that have been approved, many of them are not activated. What's the duration they have to activate by, and are they paying for the rental?
That's
fee?
time.
They, yeah. And
All right,
So-
a brief
so-
answer. I'll cede my time over for this, but briefly, thank you.
Yeah, very good. So there are sites that have been constructed. As soon as construction commences, the carrier is required to begin paying rent. They're typically following relatively quickly afterwards with their backhaul, which then allows them to activate the site and begin providing signal.
Okay, thanks very much. Councilmember Willie.
Yeah. So Chad, if you could put up your picture with the all the street lights just for a moment there, and that one will follow it with your one at 1,000-foot spacing.
Yeah, let me pull this up. Is this the one you were asking for?
Well, the one with, yeah, that's good enough. So right now you could have cells on all those poles, and that's the reason it's not quite what I was thinking, because that's 30 foot versus what the city currently has, 20 feet.
Here's 20 foot.
Yes. Okay. So we would have that many cells if they desire. Can you flip to the one where you have a 1,000-foot spacing?
This is
And there you go, that one. So in this instance, you're essentially showing 4 cells and a dead zone in the middle. And so with a cell in the middle, you'd have no dead zone, correct?
Yeah, theoretically no dead zones.
And only 5 cells. Are you aware that Los Altos, you said they had a litigation, but
30
Los
seconds.
Altos resolution 2019-35 requires a minimum spacing of 1,500 feet. Are you aware of that?
That is my understanding, yes.
Yes. They also have a requirement 500 feet from schools and noticing of 1,000 feet. Are you aware of those?
I am aware of those, yes.
Okay. I'm wondering why we don't feel that we
That is
should-
time. If you want to wrap up your question, Councilmember Willie, please
Yeah.
feel free. I'll go ahead and cede some more of my time to your question.
Yeah,
but briefly-
Palo Alto has it's got 600 feet to schools, and it's got a kind of a complex one for residential. I don't have time to explain it. And they also have a requirement for community meetings that the applicant has to have. I'll go into those when we do our deliberations, but I sure hope you're aware of these surrounding communities that if they're able to use these requirements. I've been asking for this for close to 2 years. So it doesn't seem like we're even close to them. So I'll hold it that for the time being. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to assume that a response is not needed to that statement, Councilmember Willie. And so let me ask my question. It will be brief, although I'll keep the time running. What is within our purview to change? It seems like we've gotten a nice presentation, if you will, on what we cannot do. But for instance, what we can do is certainly adjust the review process, although I did not see that indicated in the presentation. And so that's not really a rhetorical question. It is really more of a request to give us some feedback in the original materials as to what is within the purview of council. So there's 20 seconds left in my time. If staff would like to speak to that point, please feel free to do so at this time.
I can probably take a crack at this. I mean, the FCC guidelines are requiring cities to review these applications within 90 days. Our permitting process has been streamlined to facilitate that rapid turnaround. So revising the permitting guidelines, we would have to ensure that we're not adding additional time onto those shot clocks.
Okay, I'll go ahead and cut you off there, and we'll move to the members of the public. I see 5 hands raised at this point. I would like to apprise the members of the public of my practice this year with regard to calling upon people. If your hand is not raised by the time the first speaker is done, I will not call on you. And so currently we do have an added number of hands. So it's 12 and counting at this point. Our first 3 hands are from Jennifer Griffin, Russell Hancock, and David Witkowski. Welcome, Jennifer. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Darcy. I am glad that you all are having a study session on this. I think the more that the public understands what to expect or learn about this during the rollout, the better it is for the public. Because this is a high visibility project, et cetera, et cetera. Every city's going through it. I am familiar with what's going on in Los Altos, and essentially there are some issues in San Jose also. I just had a couple of questions, and I had attended the other workshops the city had had the last couple of years, but I think the more information the public has, the better. So the first one is, if this is with T-Mobile and Verizon, are we going to be having potentially T-Mobile coming in? Will they co-locate, or would they have to have a whole bunch of different poles that are, I mean, will they co-locate with Verizon? I mean, I think you talked about that, staff talked about that just a few minutes ago, but I'm wondering if we're going to have like a co-location issue. How is that being handled? Because T-Mobile is rolling this out as well as Verizon. Also, this technology is being delivered by satellites. If the city does have these installations going up across the city, and there could be a lot of them, what is the lifetime for this? Are we looking at 5 years, 10 years, or will all this have to be scrapped in 5 years? I understand that telecommunications is a dynamic, volatile area, but it would be interesting. I don't really know much about the satellite delivery of this. If you guys could talk about that. The satellites will stay there, but we may have different ways of delivering for 5G in the future. And then I just wanted to know, are you all, what happens in terms of parks? Are these going into areas around parks and parking lots? Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And before we go on to our next speaker, I want to thank you also for not using the entirety of your time. I currently have 17 hands up, including Jennifer's. And so I'll let the public know, because we do have a hard stop at 6:40. I'm going to be giving our council members and staff an interim period before the 6:45 regular meeting starts. However, and I'm not anticipating getting through all of public comments, but if people would try to keep to the succinctness of their comments, and if their sentiments have been expressed, please by reference to save some time, please do so. And so we will go ahead and entertain a motion early on in our regular agenda to continue this study session, which is not to say, again, you have unlimited amounts of time, but please keep in mind if that's your concern as we go on to the public comments. All right, our next speaker is Russ Hancock. Welcome, Russ.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council. Russell Hancock, I'm the president and CEO of Joint Venture Silicon Valley. We're a regional organization. We bring together the region's leaders to tackle issues that are facing Silicon Valley, and among them are our communications infrastructure. So I simply wanted to tell you that the issues that you're deliberating matter not only to Cupertino, but they matter to the region. So we appreciate the conscientious care that you're taking. We also want to make sure that you don't lose the big picture here. Connectivity, broadband communications, whether wired or wireless, really matter. They've become a basic requirement of life in the 21st century. Our safety, our security, our competitiveness, our connectivity, equity, and access for things like remote learning, all of these things are at stake here. So thank you for taking a conscientious approach, but thank you as well for taking an expeditious approach. It's important enough that the pandemic relief packages, including CARES, have all included funding for broadband. The Biden administration is proposing $100 billion in funding for network expansion as part of the infrastructure spending plan. I want to point out that it's interesting, maybe even ironic, that Cupertino is the home of Apple, which created the iPhone, which together with Android has provided the basis for a wave of innovation and economic growth. And yet the city of Cupertino actually has some of the slowest cellular networks in our region. That's a concern to us. And so we do ask your time and attention to this matter. Finally, I'll just point out that nationally, 4G has contributed billions to our national gross domestic product, and it will contribute billions to our GDP in the coming years. So for that reason as well, we appreciate your time and attention. The next speaker is my colleague, David Witkowski. He's one of the nation's experts on these matters. So thank you for listening to David as well. And finally, I'll just mention that we'll submit our comments in writing and we'll also make it available on the Joint Venture Silicon Valley blog. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Russ. And our next speaker is David Witkowski. Our speakers after that are Cindy Wu and Muni Madapatla. Welcome, David.
Okay, sorry about that. Am I unmuted now? I apologize.
Unmuted.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Mr. Mayor, honorable council members, city staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm David Witkowski. I am the executive director of the Civic Technologies program in Joint Venture Silicon Valley. As our CEO, Russ, pointed out, I lead the technology side of Joint Venture's initiatives, and specifically we deal with broadband communications. That includes wireless. I want to point out to you that cellular communications is increasingly the technology of choice for connectivity in the 21st century. Over 60% of households in the Western United States are wireless only, i.e. they no longer have wired telephones. Across the United States, 50 million children live in wireless only households. And for over 75% of people below the age of 34, meaning young adults just starting their careers, cellular is the technology of choice. 80% of calls to 911 are made from cellular phones. So robust in-home cellular coverage is critical for both economic development and public safety. Cellular broadband has been a lifeline during the pandemic. Students that were sent into distance learning in March of 2020 were given 4G hotspots and sent home, told to distance learn. The ability of them to connect was directly related to the coverage of 4G in their neighborhoods. And this would not have been possible if that coverage didn't exist. Per the Santa Clara County Office of Education, of the 16,000 students in our county who were provided with internet access so that they could do distance learning, over 14,000 of them relied on 4G hotspots to make that happen. I want to point out a couple of other things. 4G is an important technology. The evolution of that is 5G. This is a change in the modulation, not a change necessarily in any of the impacts that occur on the human body or on our environment. 5G is not just about faster smartphones. It will be used for other services. That will include delivery of broadband to the home, providing an alternative to DSL and cable, fiber, and giving those consumers an alternative and consumer choice, which drives down prices. I also want to point out that beliefs that cellular equipment will reduce property valuations are unproven by objective economic analyses. Our study in 2012, the Valbridge study in 2018, Manning's study in 2010 all found no evidence of property value reduction from cellular equipment. And the final comment that I want to make for, relative to Councilmember Wiley, where he talked about 1,000-foot spacing, it's important to remember that with a 1,000-foot spacing, the power of those cell sites would have to be higher. So if the concern is health effects, then you want denser spacing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cindy Wu. Welcome, Cindy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay. Yeah. I'll try to be as succinct as I can. Okay. 3 issues I want to talk about. I would prefer that we have 100 feet setback from residents. I would like the city to issue provisional 3-year permits in all residential zones, and a 500 cell tower separation from any other cell tower. And additionally, I do want to know, how is the city going to monitor the cell site to ensure that it is in the so-called safety range? Is that going to be done annually? Is this something the city is even going to be considering, or are we going to be relying on the different carriers? That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Very well done, 41 seconds. Muni Madapatla is next, followed by Rajul Pandit, followed by Jung Yi Yi. Welcome, Muni.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and the Council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Muni Madhipatla. I live in Cupertino. Currently, I'm biking on Putil Expressway, Los Altos, so apologies for the background noise. I'm also on Planning Commission, so I'm not speaking here as a Planning Commissioner. I'm speaking as a resident. So I have 3 things to say. One, there is a cell tower coming very next to my house, that's on Felton and McClellan. I did submit, alternate proposal, which was like, a pole on Dianza. Then I find out, there's a pole that's in between on which, there is already a cell tower. So I don't see a reason to have cell towers on 2 adjacent poles on McClellan and Dianza. So I would like, city to look into that, right? So that's item 1. Item 2, I don't understand, the difference between, 100 feet requirement for schools, whereas, for residences, it's 20 feet. The same kids that sit on schools, they come home and stay at the home for the rest of the day, like, 8 hours in school, and, and then there's, 16 hours, staying at the home. So how is that fair, that they exposed to the same thing that, we don't want them to expose at schools. So I would like, as Cindy said, I would like to consider, 100 feet as a requirement. Third, Cupertino residents are no inferior to, Los Altos residents. Why is that, Los Altos has stringent rules when it comes to residential installations we don't have? Listening to the staff report, it just felt like, I'm living in some kind of a autocratic, a nation where the business rules, right? I would like, residents' concerns to be the top priority, right? For both the council as well as city staff. Not a single mention of, residents' concerns in any of that staff report. Everything was about, what business wants and how we cannot, stand up against it. I would feel much better now living in Los Altos than Cupertino, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you, Muni. Our next speaker is Rajul Pandit. Welcome, Rajul.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I completely echo what Muni just said. But first, a comment to the joint ventures communications guys, the 2 of them who spoke up early. I'm sorry, with due respect, though, you did not tell me anything that I do not know. I'm a radiologist. I've been working from home quite a bit during the pandemic. Of course, I rely on cellular network and high connectivity and all that. I look at images, very high resolution images from home, and I make diagnoses on patients. So yes, of course, we value high connectivity, but with all due respect, again, we are not asking for prohibition of the 5G cell sites, small cell sites. What we are asking, and you can already sense that in the previous speakers the residents who have spoken, is we are asking for sensible deployment of the 5G. And thank you for putting the slides up. Peter Chu and myself are going to just very briefly talk on this. And I would like to go to the next slide, Kristen. So really my buzzwords for today, my main appeal to the council is related to the distance, the 100 feet distance. And I saw the presentation earlier by staff, and I understand the density and how much can be given, and 100 feet seems like, oh, we will not, it will severely affect category 2, but category 2 and 3. But really that there are other cities who are doing 300 feet, 500 feet. So why should Cupertino be less? 100 feet is what we are hoping should be the minimum distance from residences. And just the second point, that not just guidelines, but ordinances. We need an ordinance for that, because guidelines we feel as residents may be not held to strict standards for of these carriers. So really my urge is 100 feet minimum distance from residences and an ordinance for that. And then as one of the other previous speakers also said, and I won't take up too much time, is provisional permits. We do not know more about 5G and what it entails. So can we, if they are going to be next to residences, then we at least insist on having provisional permits for up to 3 years, and then reevaluate the process and see where we can go from there. And the second point in this slide is a more of a fine point about if we are going to make exceptions, and if we are going to go less than 100 feet from residences, then we really must have the carrier formally notify the residents, publicly show that they can't put it anywhere else, and so on and so forth. So thank you so much for giving me this time.
Okay, very good. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and Madam City Clerk, you can keep that presentation up. I know I said that the next speaker is Jung Yi. However, Peter Chu is the next person after that. And because of the fact that, for efficiency's sake, I'm going to go ahead and call on Peter because it's the same presentation. And so apologies to Jung Yi. We'll get to you next. Welcome, Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council Member. Keep it brief today. Continuing with what Roger just said, is that I think that the 100 feet is important. There are a lot of options. I think, having gone through the experience of discussing with staff, thank you for working with me, and also with Verizon, is that, the process is not transparent. We need to sort of know what are the alternatives. I mean, for example, I looked at a lot of, I went around survey, provided a lot of different poles that are more in main thoroughways and so forth. And they come back with, well, it's got an overhead wire into that light post. I mean, so those are things, for example, that I think that, and they give me a one-point answer and not how they came about the whole process. So I think transparency and full disclosure is actually absolutely necessary. But let me get to the second point, is that I think it's really important for us to really think about, do we want a city with towers of, these 5-foot tall structures on top of every light post? Look out your window. I see 3 light poles around 2 of the windows in my room. And if they have 5-foot tall structures on top of that across the whole city, that's not the quality of living I'm looking for in Cupertino when I moved in here 20 years ago. So, to earlier point, as John brought up, Councilman Willie, I think that we really have to reconsider, why is it Los Altos can have a map that has 15-foot sort of a cell site distances between them? Yes, we may have to increase the power, but we'll get less cell towers. I mean, those are the trade-offs I think that the residents should be able to make. So I really like for the city staff to reconsider this kind of mapping and working with the Verizon, come with it, because at the end of the day, we have 5 vendors out there, and T-Mobile and Sprint is not even listed on there. They're probably the next most aggressive 5G providers behind AT&T and Verizon. If they all come in, instead of the 100 nodes that Verizon has already put up, we're going to get 400, 500. That's not quality of living when I look out my window, same with everybody else. So I love what Peggy said earlier, is think about co-location. Is there a way we can consolidate some of this? Once again, my goal is hopefully we have a city where I don't look out and see iron towers everywhere. So, and then, I love what Palo Alto's doing with their vendor called Crown Castle. They're doing underground manholes. So you know what? I think that's creative. And lastly, to Chad Mosley earlier, is that 500 feet is what is obstructed. But when I look at the light posts around Cupertino, everything's below that level. So they're pretty much unobstructed. And that's at least 1,500, not 2 kilometers by a lot of the other measure, the standard that people are putting out there. So please look into that for us. So as Mooney said, all these other cities are making their quality of life better than ours. Why can't we have the same thing? Just last slide real quick.
15 seconds.
I can do that in 15. There's nothing more. I said it. You know, I don't want to live in a city of iron towers. And really, there's at least 150 people that signed up for more than this. They signed a petition in 3 days says 100 feet minimum setback, 500 feet between cell sites.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jungi, thank you for your patience. And you're next, followed by Venkat Ranganathan, followed by Alex Loop. Welcome, Jungi.
Thank you, Mayor Paul, to letting me speak. And thanks for the presentation. It's a well-prepared documents, but I see a lot of contradictory arguments in here. So let's say the FCC doesn't allow the rejection of the installation based on the health concerns, radio frequency related health concerns, but even the joint venture advocates, they admit that there are health consequences of these cell towers, right? So if it is true, if even the advocates can admit that, then why should we allow this kind of cell towers in our neighborhood within such a short range of the distance from the house? And the matter of fact is that the network is important, but everyone in our neighborhood, the major form of wireless access at home is Wi-Fi through the cables or some other kind of landline, some other networks. So we don't really need this kind of 5G network and cell towers in every few other houses. So therefore, I don't think we need to kind of loosen our standard to lower to provide every cell providers to install any location they want. Please make it 100 feet. And I think this one, and also, and if let's say if we cannot apply the health concerns and only it is aesthetic concern as FCC says, then why then the houses within 20 feet closer to the cell tower, potential small cell tower, their aesthetics is more important than those who is 30, 40, or 50, 60 feet, right? So if it is really, if the order decision is based on purely aesthetic reason, then the 20 feet or 10 feet or 50 feet, 100 feet, there is no difference in terms of the aesthetic concerns between the residents, right? So therefore, applying this distance from the cell tower, I mean the pole to their house doesn't seem to make any sense either to me, right? So therefore, I don't think what the city is trying to do is really convincing that people can agree into. So we need to, I really urge that, keep their 100 feet distance as many residents support, or don't even apply any distance-based preference either, because it's purely that's purely based on the aesthetics, and I don't think my aesthetics is less important than anyone else's. So that's pretty much all my comments.
Thank you, Jungi. Our next speaker is Venkat Ranganathan, followed by Alex Loop, followed by William W. Welcome, Venkat.
Hey, good evening, Council. I'm Venkat Ranganathan, and thanks for allowing me to talk today. And also special thanks to the city manager for encouraging me to participate in today's study session, which I would like to draw the attention that everybody talked about the setbacks and also the need for the city to be free from, not turn into a cell tower jungle. Particularly from my location, which is just 20 feet out of my bedroom window, there is a cell tower coming. But I'm more talking from the other points that I have already sent lots of emails about the various aspects of planning management on this, as well as the measuring the signals, etc. But few questions I have. What is the specification on the noise pollution from these? Because these are going to have transformers, and because at 8,000 watt, they will be, what is the city's specification there. What has been done by the city when the application comes in? How do they make sure that it doesn't affect the aesthetics of this area? Like, for example, in my house, they were coming in and somebody first came in, dug up a hole, removing a couple of plants that were on the park strip, which we had landscaped with lots of, sprinklers and all. And then there was another one who came and said, I'm going to remove the entire front plant. And then I represented to the city manager, and there was an alternate approach. And then that brings me to the second question. If there is a change in the plan on what they were interested in doing, they now went and dug up the city street in front of me. So how long does it take? Within like 3-4 days, the permit was again approved, the modified permit was approved. So, and then what is the notification procedure for the property owner who is immediately impacted for this, about these things? I will follow up with more questions on and separate email because I don't want to take too much of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkat. Our next speaker is Alex Loop, followed by William W., followed by Dinyar Dastoor. Welcome, Alex.
Good evening, Mayor Paul, Vice Mayor Chow, council members and staff. My name is Alex Loip, and I'm here today representing Verizon. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the council this evening. I just want to piggyback on some of the previous comments here. Wireless communications infrastructure is critical infrastructure. I think the last year has really driven this point home beyond a reasonable doubt. It's economic infrastructure. It's education infrastructure. It's safety infrastructure.
What?
It's healthcare infrastructure.
Yeah. And then you go out.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a little crosstalk here. Small cells are becoming the backbone of modern communications infrastructure. That's where we're going with 5G and beyond, right? So certainly this is about ensuring that there's a robust and reliable 5G wireless service for residents, workers, and visitors in Cupertino. But it's not just about mobile connectivity. The same state-of-the-art network that we're building is also going to enable a new competitive option for high-speed fixed broadband service for residents and small businesses. That service that we call 5G Home uses the same small cells that we're talking about here to provide gigabit speed internet service to homes and small businesses without the costly and time-consuming need to trench fiber directly to the home or to the structure. This 5G Home service is currently available in San Jose and Sacramento and other jurisdictions throughout the state that have the infrastructure to support it. And we desperately want to bring that service to Cupertino residents. I'll just, reference a lot of these cities that other folks are referencing here as models. I'll just say that in a lot of those cities, not a single small cell has been built. I can tell you about Palo Alto specifically, since the pandemic began, not a single small cell has been able to be permitted because of the cumbersome process that city has. I had a council member call me and ask me, what can we do to get better service? We're all at home working and learning. How do I get better service? And I said, this isn't a marketing issue. This is a policy problem. And so we're working with them to hopefully fix that. But this is not a model to emulate. Certainly not Los Altos or Mill Valley or Petaluma or any other place that has essentially banned this infrastructure. These are not models for the heart of Silicon Valley to follow. And so I would really urge the Cupertino to look elsewhere for models to follow in terms of small cell related legislation. One more thing I like to note is that, and I put this in the inbox of the council members earlier today, is that there is a petition out there in favor of this infrastructure and in favor of the services
15 seconds.
And things that it brings to the city. And more than 140 residents have signed that. So this is, a both sides issue here. This is not a cut and dry issue. So I think those residents' concerns should be taken into account as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Our next speaker is William W., followed by Dinyar Dastoor, followed by Paul L. Britton. Welcome, William.
Good. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and all the council members and staff. I just would like to take this opportunity to, kind of echo a couple of the speakers that have already, spoken out earlier, right? And I want to say that, I think we all understand that the technology, will certainly improve the quality of life, right? But I think the issue right now is really how do we do this sensibly so that it does not impact the current quality of life that we're having in Cupertino. There's, certain setback like 100 feet, why school versus residence have a different, setback requirement. Is it really a guideline versus ordinance? I think all these needs to be taken into consideration. And, aesthetically, putting these poles in the park, it's also, impacting, the view and the landscape of the parks. And also, the other consideration we need to look into is the accountability of these safety issues, right? I hear about, the provisional proposal, but, how do we how do we set up the accountability system that, we ensure these are all safe to operate, right? What is the safety limit? How do we make sure that there's a regular cadence that these are being looked into? So those are the kind of thing that, as a part of this sensible, sensibility of the deployment, we should look into it. And also, the other neighboring cities, right, like Saratoga or Palo Alto, right, what they are as a world-class quality city as Cupertino, right? So, we should definitely look into how we reference, how they're setting up their policy and ordinance in terms of, making these more sensible deployments of the 5G cells. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, William. Our next speaker is Dinyar Dastoor, followed by Paul Albritton, followed by Tito Das. Welcome, Dinyar.
Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, council members. I'm Dinyar Dastoor, a resident of Cupertino. I am echoing the sentiments expressed by the speakers. Other than the industry, everybody had the same points, so I'm not going to repeat that. I'm bringing a unique perspective here. My house is less than 10 feet distance from the pole. It's literally 2 human steps from the pole. So as I read the report, I have this main question that in the report, there is always within 20 feet. It doesn't talk about a minimum distance that has to be maintained. So my one appeal to you is to please define what that is. What is the minimum distance, not within 20 feet? Second point is, how was this decided? If the pole was to be so close, why was the process not transparent? Why were the residents not consulted? And the most important thing is, how do we rectify this? If it is going to be 2 feet within my backyard, where we sleep, where we live, what do we do about that? And third question is, of course, the work has already started. So what is going to be the outcome of this study session for the poles where the work has already started? And then perhaps the most minor point, but the workers came and cut off the bush, saying, oh, we made a mistake in counting the trench size, and therefore they just took it out. Again, minimal element here, but the whole point is I want the city to be sensitive to residences, and those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dinyar. Our next speaker is Paul Albritton, followed by Tito Das, and followed by Nori. Welcome, Paul.
Audio now unmuted. You can unmute your microphone to start speaking.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Paul Albritton, outside counsel for Verizon Wireless. Thank you for paying so much attention to this really important topic. In the staff report, it was pointed out to you that there's state and federal law limits to your authority in the right-of-way. And I just want to say that there's a reason for those limits, and it's because we have a statewide need and this national need to have a cohesive network and not a patchwork of regulations from city to city. And so they're not just arbitrary. These are important that we have these regional regulations of wireless networks. Under state law, California Public Utility Code 7901 allows telephone corporations and wireless corporations to place poles, posts, and piers in local rights of way in order to provide service. Here, Verizon Wireless over the last 4 years has worked diligently with the city not to place these facilities on telephone poles and not to place their own independent poles, but to place them on light standards designed with the city. There was a proposal for 3-year terms on these facilities. State law specifically says that the terms of these facilities cannot be unreasonably short, and that would not be a legal proposal. From the federal perspective, you know that you can't regulate facilities based on the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions. And I have to tell you that something like a 500-foot setback from a school is exactly that. There's no other reason for a 500-foot setback from schools other than with respect to environmental effects of radio frequency emissions. And that is the reason why Verizon and Los Altos are suing Los Altos over that regulation, because it is opposed to the entire national standard of FCC exposure that's been tried and evaluated in tens of thousands of studies. And that would not emulate other jurisdictions that have illegal ordinances. Just because the city adopts an ordinance, and you know there are hundreds of cities in California, and many have adopted illegal ordinances, that doesn't make them legal or defendable in any way. And so we would, even though somebody may have that regulation, I think you'll find that they're going to be challenged now or in the future. The other restriction of the federal law is that you can't materially inhibit the provision of wireless services. Unfortunately, Verizon has run into communities that have done that. Danville, Capitola, other jurisdictions where we've had to sue and overturn their decisions in order to provide wireless service. So again, Verizon Wireless is really here to work with you on the regulation of wireless facilities. And we're trying to do our best to place these facilities in a manner that is aesthetically sensitive to the community concerns. There were a couple, I just wanted to say quickly, Saratoga was mentioned. Verizon Wireless has been placing facilities in Saratoga for quite some time, and in Sunnyvale and a number of your local jurisdictions where these facilities are being deployed and really disappear into the landscape once they become part of the landscape.
Thank you, Paul. Our next speaker is Tito Das, followed by Nori, followed by Peggy Griffin. At this point, we do have 5 more speakers with approximately 9 minutes left before our next session starts. And I did say that we'll have a hard stop. So Tito will be the last speaker that I take in the scheduled study session up till 6:40. However, I will be asking council for a motion early on under postponements and orders of the day to continue this session, the study session, to before our agenda items that have consent calendar items in our regularly scheduled agenda. And so Tito, you'll be our last speaker during this period of time. But again, we will in all likelihood continue this into our regular session. Welcome, Tito.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I don't know if fortunately or unfortunately I happen to be the last speaker, but I think I heard comments from both angry residents who don't like poles near their homes because of health issues, cosmetic issues, as well as I heard comments from Verizon and telecommunication companies who want to push the envelope. So I believe that the council people will take a wise decision in the sense like you need to strike a fine balance between the two, because you just can't say like no to everything. When you give up something, you ask for something else. So what I was wondering is that I'll take my simple example. So I live in the Monte Vista neighborhood west of 85, and I work at Apple. So when we moved to Cupertino for the first time, I did not get Verizon cell phone coverage. I used to have Verizon. I did not get Verizon cell phone coverage at home nor at work because our office building was at De Anza and Stevens Creek. It's like in the middle of everything, or hustle bustle, just behind the Valero gas station. So what I started is that I started switching careers, like Verizon to T-Mobile. I tried for 2 months. Even T-Mobile didn't work out, and somebody said, oh, you didn't know that AT&T has a tower right on top of our building. And I switched to AT&T. At least I got something at work. So what I'm trying to say is that I think I saw in your proposal like a 500 feet exception for schools, but pretty much a flat rule for everything else. So can the council member take a look, for example, maybe not necessarily like one rule fits all scenario, in the sense like, can we have a little different rules for residential places, like where you hardly have any homes and people are very concerned about the setbacks, versus commercial zoning where people probably are not that much concerned about these cell phone towers because they need more and more cell phone coverage. because what will happen is that just like the cell phone companies want more clients because of this outreach, I think the clients, I think the telecommunication also depends on the bandwidth. So maybe they are okay putting more towers in dense places where they get more bang for the bucks versus not putting so many towers in sparse residential places, because you'll probably have like 10 houses, 15 houses who won't be their clients. So my request to the council is that when you look into the proposal, see if there is a possibility of the same thing, like not one size fits all. And if you can make the telecommunication company happy by giving some zoning related quota or allotment or setbacks or things like that. So thank you a lot, and I hope you'll do a great job.
Thank you, Tito. We always aim to please, but we are at 6:40 right now. We have Nori, Peggy Griffin, Lisa Warren, and Lee Mean when we recommence this. As of right now, we'll go ahead and break until 6:45 when the regular session for City Council today will begin. Thank you very much. We'll see you in about 5 minutes.
Is this the same network? We're not leaving, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome to the April 20th regularly scheduled meeting of the Cupertino City Council. Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct the roll call?
Councilmember Moore?
Here.
Councilmember Way?
Here.
Councilmember Willie?
Here.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Here.
Mayor Paul?
And I'm here. Okay, at this point, we will conduct a ceremonial matter and a presentation with regard to an Arbor Day proclamation. I understand that we do have a couple of members of staff to make a presentation. And I believe, did you say, Madam City Clerk, that we had a video for this or some other presentation?
I will present the proclamation, but I believe they are using this video footage for the Earth Day celebration this weekend.
Okay, very good. And are our members of staff here to speak to this item?
So Jonathan Ferrante, our city arborist, should be here.
Okay, well, in any event, go ahead and maximize your screen, I guess. It's the button next to the X. Yeah. All right, well, this is the proclamation for Arbor Day, and we have provided it in the past, and essentially it's an encouragement to plant more trees, which, of course, given our current environmental conditions, is a great thing to do to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And of course, there are a lot of great aesthetic and other benefits to trees as well. So I will go ahead and close this out, and we are happy to provide that proclamation for Arbor Day. Our next item is postponements and orders of the day. We did have a study session immediately before this regularly scheduled council session. And so what I would like to do is a couple of things. I'd like to ask for a motion first to continue that study session to directly before our consent calendar. So that will be before item 4. Second, we did notice this in the item itself. We indicated that the item number 11, I believe it was, regarding secondhand smoke may be continued to May 4th. And so I would like to ask that that be continued. And then finally, because we're continuing the study session and based upon an estimation of time, I would like to ask that the movement also continue item number 12, which is the fiscal year 21 to 22 fee schedule update to May 4th as well. Is there anyone who would like to make that motion?
I'll motion that we move those 3 items to the other council meeting.
Okay, great. And just to clarify, Councilmember Willie, we're moving the study session item to just before consent calendar.
Right, yes, yes.
Okay, great, thank you for that clarification. And would anyone like to second Councilmember Willie's motion?
I second that.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. Is there any discussion? I don't see unique hands raised beyond our study session item. And so I will go ahead and bring it back to council. Barring any further comment, I would like to ask for a roll call vote from our city clerk.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just for clarity, you said it was being continued to be heard before consent?
Yes, before
Okay.
consent. And
Thank
so
I do.
I do see a hand raised from Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Moore.
Okay, I just want to clarify item 14. If the meeting has not concluded by midnight, well, you, Mayor Paul, will entertain a motion to continue any unfinished business so that there is the potential that other items like item 13 on field use would get moved.
Right, exactly. And so, yes, that is exactly right. And that is a possibility as well. But field use would need to have been considered before fees. And so that's why I'm asking for number 12 as opposed to 13 to be continued. So thank you for that point and notice and clarification to the public. Are there any other comments from council before we conduct the vote? Okay, seeing no hands, Madam City Clerk, if you would please conduct a roll call vote.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, and so what I will say is that for the item that has now been placed in front of the consent calendar, I'll let the people who still have their hands up know that you can lower your hands now. I've already identified at the end of study session, and I will identify now that the public comments will be from Nori, Peggy Griffin, Lisa Warren, and Lee Mean. But at this point in our agenda, we are at oral communications of our regular meeting. And just for notice's sake, we do have 3 brief agenda items before we get back to the study session, and those are essentially updates and reports from council members. So for oral communications, currently I have 3 hands up. They are from Jennifer Griffin and Jean Bedord, and the third person lowered a hand, but yes, so we have two hands up right now, and for members of the public, I'll go ahead and reiterate my practice this year. Once the first speaker is done speaking, if you do not have your hand up, I will not call on you for oral communications. And so our first speaker is Jennifer Griffin. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin, and I just wanted to speak tonight about SB 9, which is a high-density housing bill that Tony Adkins and Senator Wiener and 2 other co-authors and a bunch of sponsors have introduced to the legislature and is going through the process of hopefully not becoming a bill. SB 9 was insidious when it began because it involves massive lot splits, destabilizing suburban neighborhoods by increasing lot splits ministerially. That means that you just walk in to permitting and they give you a permit and walk out. You don't have to tell the neighbors. Now, I don't know what universe those people are operating in. I mean, these are elected senators and they are putting something like this out to become a bill. And I just cannot believe the mayhem that this is going to cause. Why would anyone, an elected official, throw this out on the people, especially people that aren't in the districts of these 2 senators? The other thing that has been drawn to our attention is that this would require 4-foot setbacks from each side of the lot and a 4-foot setback from the back property line. Now you realize that we have many, many buildings that would be going in on 3,000 to 5,000 square foot lots, but you have a 4-foot setback around the entire sides and back of the property. Arbor Day is coming up. You cannot get a tree of any size that would be healthy, that would be stuffed in a 4-foot setback. And the other thing that is frightening about this bill and others is that they are trying to streamline and cut out CEQA, which means there are no environmental impacts. How can you have things like this occur without looking at the environmental impacts. Believe me, when they come for our trees, people are going to be chaining themselves. And I'm going to put a shout out to Berkeley. They are the original city that chained themselves to trees, but they have eliminated single family housing in their city, and they didn't let their residents know. There are going to be people out when they come for their trees. People are going to be chaining themselves like in the 60s. We can't let this type of insipid housing bill be passed. This is anyone that would pass this
15 seconds
has no comprehension of environmental, and the people that write these bills obviously have no environmental training. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our next speaker is Jean Bedord, followed by someone labeled call-in user who's calling in. And I'll remind the members of the public that oral communications is for any item that is not on the agenda. As of right now, field usage is still on the agenda. And so our next speaker is Jean Bedord. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Paul and honorable council members. I am here tonight to talk about how this council can support the Cupertino Union School District. Next slide. Our school districts are financially strapped, and as a community, we need to support them through tax measures. As you know, the Measure A ballot for CUSD School District has already arrived in voters' mailboxes. There is an active door-to-door campaign, as well as signs around town and direct mail. I want to thank this council for unanimously endorsing this measure. I don't know how many residents are aware of the time-critical nature of this parcel tax. In 2 months, the district has to submit a balanced 3-year budget. The current parcel tax expires in 2 years, so the district would be faced with immediate actions to close schools, despite the new RENA allocations of over 4,500 new housing units. Passage of this parcel tax gives the district time to restructure to accommodate upcoming changes. In addition, residents may not be aware of the inequities of the property tax base which supports our outstanding schools. These numbers tell the story. Cupertino has a lower tax base than comparable school districts with fewer students. So of course, these districts have more money per student to spend on teacher salaries and student services. Palo Alto is often held up as an example. But look, they have almost 50% more money to spend on students than CUSD. Santa Clara got the Apple spaceship so they could offer higher salaries for teachers. Next slide. Though the city is a different jurisdiction than the school district, council decisions have a direct impact on school district finances by suppressing growth in total property valuation. This is a council which has seen a whopping 20 housing units added in 2020, with no multifamily applications in 2019. Projects which could contribute in the next 5 years have been delayed. New projects face multiple barriers for approval, and in the meantime, costs go up 20% this last year, according to the Mercury News this weekend, meaning delayed projects, even if approved, may not be economically viable.
15 seconds.
Please consider the property tax implications of your legislative actions. Again, thank you for your support of Measure A.
Thank you, Jean. Our next speaker is call-in user. And Madam City Clerk, if you would remind us what the star function is to unmute oneself on the phone.
Star 6, Mayor.
Star 6. Okay, great. So call-in user, you don't have a designation for digits. I apologize for that, but I will allow you to talk now. And if that's you, hit star 6. Okay, I see that you're unmuted now. You can begin to speak. Or there may be a technological issue. Okay, so the person designated call-in user, we can't actually hear you. So I will try to get back to you after the rest of the hands that are raised have been reached. We next have Lisa Warren, followed by Hemant Butch, followed by Prabhu Kutuyam. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. I'm here. So I need to make a comment about a written communication that was sent last meeting where the resident referred to that the council should be following direction. And I just want to remind everyone, staff gives council recommendations. Council gives staff direction. And if I'm wrong about that, please let me know. Anyway, that's just one thing. I want to make a comment, please, about major retail at Main Street. Some know and some do not know that the small Target Express at Main Street will be closing, along with a pharmacy inside. And I want to remind everyone who was here and note to people who weren't here at the time when Main Street was approved, that particular space, that building 6, is to be major retail. They've already maxed out on their restaurants, as far as I know. And so what I'm asking is there to be a very conscious and knowledgeable look at what may be able to replace the Target Express, because it should not be restaurants, it should not be food service, it should be what was supposed to be major retail. And along with that, the current parking situation at Target at Main Street is horrible. People are not good drivers. People are searching for non-garage, ground level parking. And what happens when people want to go to Target, and this may have been part of their demise, is that they can't park. So they move on down the street to the big Target or to Safeway in another city. So it would be potentially very brilliant for council, if possible, or staff, to be able to restrict the parking around that building and use to the use of that building, and encourage people who are going to be there at restaurants or other functions there, which mostly is restaurants, use the parking structure so that people are trying to use the actual retail can use the spaces there. So that's a request.
15 seconds.
Thanks. I had more, but I guess I'm not going to fit it in. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next speaker is Hemant Butch, followed by Prabhu Kutuyam, followed by Roshan Kumar. Welcome, Hemant. Okay, so I don't see Hemant unmuting. Let me. Okay, we have Prabhu.
Oh, yes, I unmuted myself. Sorry.
Oh, yes. Hello, Hemant.
I switched screen, so I was reading. So sorry about that. Thank you for. So what I was saying is, I'm happy to see all of you, council member. Council looks fantastic. Thank you, Mayor Paul. And what I was going to talk about is field use policy.
Stop there. Field use is on the agenda, and so we cannot legally take comment on this because it is agendized. This is oral communications. And so we will get to that. Someone remind us what agenda item it is. I believe it is item number 13. So we will hold off on that comment. Do you have any other comments in oral communications not related to an item on the agenda?
No, I mean, I think, can you tell me when that item will be? Then we'll dial back in at that.
Best estimate right now, probably approximately 9 or 9:30.
Okay. Okay, we'll check back on that.
Great.
So I think there are 3-4 people who are going to
They've taken their hands down now. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks
You're,
very much.
you are correct, Mr. Mayor. It's item number 13.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam City Manager. So our next speaker is Peggy Griffin, followed by Samir Jain, and call-in user has their hand up again. So welcome, Peggy.
Good evening, council members and staff. I want to thank you for the work you've done on housing, for not just rubber stamping every housing project, but really looking at it to make sure that it adds to our city. You've made some significant improvements, and sometimes those take time. Also, I want to thank you for asking clarifying questions. That also takes time. I want you to make an informed decision and not just rubber stamp everything. So please continue that work. I thank you.
Peggy, thank you for your brevity and succinctness. Our next speaker is Samir Jain, although I do not see the hand up still. We have call-in user again. Call-in user, I will allow you to talk. Again, it's *6 if you want to unmute yourself. Okay, unfortunately, I'm not able to hear call-in user. And so we will go ahead and close out oral communications for this evening and go on to, well, actually, I do see, oh, in any event, we'll close out oral communications and go on to item number 2 on our agenda. And that is brief reports on council member activities and brief announcements. And once again, this is an item that has been placed in at the request of council. It's an item that we have at the end of our agendas as well. And so to be able to follow up on some of the items that we hear in oral communications, we're allocating a minute each to the council members, if you so choose to use it, for the purpose of briefly following up. And if you have some summaries of very pertinent communications and interactions that you've had since the last agenda that is not an official council assignment, committee assignment, feel free to utilize that minute for that purpose as well. So I do see one hand up from our council member Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. I just want to point out that the Valco SB 35 lawsuit did not delay the development of the Valco site, and there was never an injunction against that project. Also, there was a comment about SB 9, and the Legislative Review Committee has gone over SB 9, and Mayor Paul has sent a letter to Sacramento regarding SB 9 in opposition. And if you go to the city website for the Legislative Review Committee, you can find all of our positions that we've taken so far for the various bills of interest this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore, and thank you and Vice Mayor Chow for all your work on the LRC as well. Councilmember Way is next.
I want to make a brief report that 3 of our council members, Mayor Paul and Councilmember Moore and me, attended the Sunday's Stop Asian Hate Parade in the city of Mountain View, and we're very proud to report that, actually, thank you, Kitty, for reminding me this, that we have a lot of students. One of our students, Jason Shen, actually is a host, and then we have 4 residents that spoke, 4 kids that spoke. Michael Penn, an 8-year-old resident of Cupertino, Allison Penn, a 13-year-old resident of Cupertino, and Emily Chen, 16-year-old residents of Cupertino. They make great speeches. We are very proud of our youth.
Thank you, Councilmember Way. And next we have Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, I'd just like to briefly say first, thanks to the resident for bringing up the school's Measure A. Just to be sure, if anybody did not receive their ballot, please look for it. The only item on the ballot is Measure A, and return those, I believe, by the 2nd week of May. Very important. Vote however you believe, but please vote. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Willie. Vice Mayor Chow.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Wei, for hosting the rally on April 10th. I'd like everyone to know that there will be another one at the near San Jose City Hall, and there are a few high schoolers also are helping with that one. And also former council member Michael Chen has started a site, fightasianhate.org. fightasianhate.org. He would like the site to be a clearinghouse for all the activities and the city actions taken on this aspect. And yeah. So, and then I think a lot of people are also very concerned about SB 82, which would lower the
5 seconds.
Yeah, okay. So because we would like accountability on the point,
Okay, you gotta wrap up.
might
Thank you.
straighten that. Yeah.
All right, great. So yeah, I'll take advantage of this as well. Yes, I did go to 4 stop API hate events. They were in Cupertino, Mountain View. There was one hosted by Assemblymember Lowe, as well as Congressman Khanna, and one with City Manager Deb and Captain Urena. I do appreciate the show of support. I think it's important to have these conversations, including and perhaps counterintuitively, especially with what might be perceived by some as virtue signaling and gaslighting. I view it as I view any other systemic training. The pain you feel is the weakness leaving your system, and so on and so forth. And I just ask that everyone keep an eye on staying healthy. All right, so let us go on to item number 3. I do see our city manager waving her hand.
I can do it, Kirsten. Just
And
a little
so-
thing to follow up Councilmember Willie's remarks about Measure A. Just a reminder for all of our community that there are ballot boxes outside City Hall in Quinlan.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilmember, or rather City Manager Fung. And now we are on to your item, which is an update from you as the city manager on emergency response efforts.
Yes, I do have some good news for once. I'll give a little update like I normally do. The number of new cases has dropped since last week, with 118 new cases yesterday. There's less than 1% positivity rate, and with an adjusted case rate of 2.4, we're not quite out of the orange tier, if everybody remembers what tier we're in, but that would have to drop to a 2 to get to yellow. On the dashboard at the Santa Clara County database, variants are now being tracked within the county on the website in case people are interested. There are 3 being tracked so far. Vaccine status. On April 12th, individuals 16 years of age and older were eligible for the vaccine. 32% of the population is fully vaccinated. 66% of 75 years and older are vaccinated, and 46% of 50 years and older are vaccinated. So we're making really good progress, particularly with the extra doses that we received last week and what are expected this week. Testing. There's another testing opportunity tomorrow at the Senior Center from 9:30 to 3:45. There's plenty of appointments available. In Cupertino, there are 877 cases by zip code and 888 cases by city. The great news is there are no new cases in Cupertino in the last 7 days. That's like a first since the start. So that's pretty significant, I think. On April 6, 2021, which was the last council meeting, I reported 836 cases by zip code and 847 cases by city. So congratulations to the city on no new cases in the last 7 days. Let's keep it up and we'll see how it goes. That's it.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much, City Manager Fung. And now we are on to item number 4. That is going to be updates on committee assignments. We each have 2 minutes. Who would like to go first on updating on committee assignments since our April 6th meeting? Okay, with no hands up right now, I will go ahead and provide my update. On April 7th, we had a Finance Committee meeting of the Library Joint Powers Authority. I'm very happy to report that the finances of our county library system, of which Cupertino is a very important part and has the most frequented library, are quite healthy. So we're doing well there. On the next day, April 8th, there was a Cities Association Legislative Committee, which I did ask, and Vice Mayor Chow very graciously acceded to letting me go. I'm the alternate to the Legislative Committee of the Cities Association. Primarily, I wanted to be there to speak on Assemblymember Berman's bill. I believe it's AB 1091, or it might be 3, but it has to do with the VTA structure of the board and composition. It is essentially asking for a statewide vote of the Assembly and Senate to restructure the composition of VTA board. I felt that, and I have a number of people that agree with me on certainly in the West Valley, but I believe in the majority of the cities in the county that this really is not the right time to recompose the VTA board, given where we sit right now at an inflection point. However, unfortunately, we were not able to bring forward a motion at the Cities Association. And so, but again, I thank Vice Mayor Chow for providing that opportunity. Speaking of the VTA, on the 9th, the 10th, and the 16th, we did have meetings. I'm a board member of that agency. And right now, the biggest issue with the Transportation Authority is pass-ups on bus stops. So it's hovering anywhere between 400 and 800 people per day that are passed up at the stops because of social distancing requirements. And we also haven't restored bus service to pre-pandemic levels. We still have closed sessions to hire a new general manager. And so, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to bring in somebody very good in brief order. So those are my updates from the committee assignments. I see Councilmember Willie is next, followed by Councilmember Way.
Yeah, so in this current 2-week period, 2 meetings for Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Noteworthy is that Silicon Valley Clean Energy is actually signing another power purchase agreement for wind power, adding it to the overall power that Silicon Valley Clean Energy supplies that is renewable. And so that's going to add 33.3 megawatts of wind power to the network. So I think that's great, and they're on target to get that. That's it for this week.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councilmember Willie. Councilmember Way, followed by Vice Mayor Chow.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. I attended one meeting, April 14th, the Valley Water Commission meeting. We took one action. We voted by majority, 12 yes, 6 no, to approve to not increase the groundwater production charges because of COVID, at least in 2021, and recommend the board reach out and then not increase the agriculture rate, look at other resources such as purification, recycling, federal funding, etc. So this information was given to the Valley Water Board of Directors for consideration.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Way. Vice Mayor Chow.
Hello. On the 8th, I attended the Cities Association board meeting, and they are looking at a shortfall in budget of $76,000 this year, and they have to draw the reserve. There will be a very little money left in the reserve, so next year there might be an increase in fees. And on the 14th, I attended the Housing Subcommittee meeting. We finally have final version, and everyone can will see the survey it'll be open in the month of May, and then we will collect the result in June, and then there will be a joint study session to educate everyone about housing elements in next Tuesday. And on the 15th, I attended the League of Cities Housing and Community Development Policy Committee meeting. This committee takes positions on housing bills, but they also gave us an update on the state budget. The state is looking at a $20 million surplus plus $26 billion from federal government. So the state actually has about $50 billion to spend. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. So on April 8th, I attended the VTA PAC committee meeting, which I am the chair of. And in that, we recommended that the VTA Board of Directors adopt the Morgan Hill Community-Based Transportation Plan. which is actually pretty interesting document. And we also recommended that the VTA Board of Directors approve the existing prioritization process for 5 need capacity-based program categories. And I asked our staff liaison that they would provide the sales tax by city, because there's been a question about equity within VTA and if one city is perhaps getting more resources than another. So we're still waiting for that information to come back. And I also requested and have already received clarification of the various funding sources, so we know where all the money is coming from and into VTA. On the 15th, I was the chair of the Environmental Review Committee, and we went over the role of the city's ERC, and we should have a report coming to City Council coming up. I do have an outside committee, the Cal Cities Environmental Quality Policy Committee, which held a couple of 2-hour meetings on the 15th and on the 8th. And this morning I was on another one, the Cal City Solid Waste Roundtable. There are some issues regarding SB 1383 and how the cities are going to implement it across the state. We have an issue with composting, and AB 619 we'll probably be looking into from the Legislative Review Committee to see if we can provide an extension for the implementation of increasing by 1 year. And they're looking at various recycling laws that could be passed. We might want to be looking into a single-use plastic ordinance locally if they don't pass something statewide. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thank you, Councilmember Moore. We are now at the item right before consent calendar. It's not enumerated on the agenda. However, if you'll recall, we did, under orders of the day, move our study session to continue right before consent calendar. And so we'll do that now. These are, to remind the public, small cell facilities. And furthermore, we are in the middle of public commentary on the item, and I will go ahead and read off the names of the speakers from the public that were remaining. Those are Nori, Peggy Griffin, Lisa Warren, and Lee Mean. Once again, you will have 3 minutes to give your public comment. At this point, the 4 speakers, Nori, Peggy Griffin, Lisa Warren, and Lee Mean, you will need to put your hand back up on your devices so that we can go ahead and allow you to talk through the Zoom mechanism. So welcome, Nori.
Is Mr. Mosley still in there?
Yes, he is, and we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I have been working on macro and small cell tower issue almost for 2 years. I think this study session must be 4th or 5th sessions. Currently, 32 macro cell towers and 7 active Verizon small cell, 1 active T-Mobile, 95 permitted Verizon, some are already built, 14 permitted AT&T, 7 proposed Verizon, 4 proposed AT&T. So Verizon small cell total will be 114 soon, and AT&T will be 19, but they are working on application to compete against Verizon. And perhaps T-Mobile and Sprint will be do the same. Therefore, there will be hundreds of small cell towers in Cupertino. The small cell facility will be on almost every light pole. Fcc Rf Emission Limit was set in 1996. It was 25 years ago. There were some macro cell towers, but not many or none small cell towers at that time. In my opinion, for the reason the limit was set so high. FCC, the most restrictive limit is 0.2 milliwatt per square centimeter. In this case, any small cell RF emission must be under this limit. I understand the cell tower has a lot of benefit, such as communication, public safety, traffic, and the recent 5G home internet. So it has pros and cons. Even though regulation of the wireless facilities must not be based on health concerns, if or when cell facility is mounted on each light pole, residents will be concerned about long-term health effect because we live here 24/7, 365 days. What is RF emission limit in other countries, such as Canada, England, Japan, South Korea, and China? I'm very interested in finding out the numbers. I understand no backup battery power for small cells. If power was out during the emergency, like wildfire or earthquake, the cell does not work when people need it most. All the communication lines are cut off.
10 seconds.
There are any way the backup battery can be placed underground and run by solar. Solar panel can be mounted on a light pole.
Thank you, Nori. Our next speaker is Peggy Griffin. Welcome, Peggy.
Good evening, City Council and staff. The slide you see right now is of Collins Elementary. On the left is North Blaney Avenue, and on the right is Portal Avenue. And on the left, in the yellow circle, is an approved cell tower on a light pole. And I used the GIS system. I'm not real good at it, but my best guess was 138 feet to the structure. Down on the right in Portal Park, the red circles indicate 3 playground areas, and these are oriented towards small kids. They have the small swings with the little seats with the holders in them. And the proposed and approved cell tower there is way less than 100 feet. My guess with the GIS system was about 60 feet. This is way under the class category 300-foot limit for our ordinance. Next page. Thank you. On the left, I've circled, in red is the distance I measured that's about 138 feet to the structure in Collins Elementary. And up above in yellow is a daycare. That's where the kids go after school. I just wanted to show you this, to show you that guidelines are just guidelines. And I strongly encourage you to look at ordinances. In addition, I support Peter Chu and the radiologist requests. I also thought the recommendation to do different rules for business and residents should be considered. And also the minimum distance. There should be a minimum. 2 feet that one of the residents talked about is way too close, just from an aesthetic process. So thank you. Look, I'm looking for a balance. I know there's pros and cons to everything, but what we have is not balanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Our next speaker is Lisa Warren. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. So to save time, I echo Peggy. I also echo Peter, who has spoken at every meeting I've been to about this subject. And thank you for having the study session. That's what people were hoping for, I think. But if it's not effective, then that'll be a concern. So here's the chance to be effective. I just want to state it's a little annoying, if not insulting, that we have people who aren't residents of this city refer to it being ironic that Apple Computers, Apple Company, whatever you want to call it, is within the city's boundaries. And they developed the iPhone. So isn't it ironic that people who live here aren't thrilled about these towers? It's insulting, actually. So, and also being called the heart of Silicon Valley when another person stated that this service is critical nationwide. Do not limit it to Silicon Valley and Cupertino. Do not target us in that emotional way because it doesn't work. It shouldn't work. So that's my little anger spit. But Arbor Day also I'm questioning whether when these towers that are approved go up, as trees around them will naturally grow, will they then have to be trimmed? Are we limiting our tree canopy to save the service? By the way, I am a Verizon customer, have been for decades, also a stockholder, and my service is just fine everywhere in the city. So that's just another comment. I want to recognize that Palo Alto is recognized in their ordinances or guidelines, whichever they are, that the visual impact of these towers is important, and they've limited the height restrictions to ease that. I'm sorry, did you tell me I'm limited in minutes, seconds?
You have 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Okay. And I also noted, and maybe Chad addressed this already, but the map shows only existing light poles. But as I understand it, they really can be standalone poles, which are all metal. And the closest one to my home, the only one I've gotten a notice of, is indeed going to be not on a light pole, but very close to a light pole. And I can't remember the reason for that, but it'll be a standalone unless.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next speaker is Lee Mean. Welcome, Lee Mean.
Hi. Yes. Thanks for the opportunity for me to speak. Yeah, I want to echo my fellow citizens, including Peter and Muni and others. Yeah, I have also sent a lot of emails to City Council and the city staff, expressing my concern on the 5G cell site rollout. There is a proposed Verizon cell site right next outside my living room and bedroom, less than 10 feet of distance from my property line. I understand the city is concerned of violating the FCC rule. However, in the meanwhile, in spite of the FCC rule, I believe city can still do a lot of things to protect citizens. In fact, many cities, including our neighbors, the shelters, have already taken a lot of actions. Yeah, so first, I think city should put strict regulation on the commercial, public, and the residential district. We strongly believe that 5G is not needed at all in residential areas. We have 4G broadband at home already. We are doing remote learning. We are doing working from home without any problem. If the vendors like Verizon, they do believe they need to put the small cells, city needs to hear from the impacted citizens. And we want more strict requirements on the setback rules to residential property lines. Peter mentioned in the petition 100 feet minimum distance from any structure. I would actually want some minimum setback from the residential property lines because people can tear down the house and build a new house. So today is 30 feet. Maybe after the new house is built, it becomes 20 feet. So set some minimum distance from the residential property line is important. And we already have the 100 feet minimum distance to the schools. Yeah, I'm wondering why there is like only 20 feet distance from the residents' homes. If school rules are to protect children, we need more strict rules to protect residents' homes because children and families spend the majority of their time at home. And other things, we want city to put density regulation on the cell site deployment. The shelters requires a minimum of 1,500 feet between four cell facility. What is the Cupertino standard? And in addition, we need some safety regulation. Attaching the 5G cells on the city poles will make the cell less stable.
Thank you, Lee Mean. Okay, so we have finished with our public comments on the study session item. We'll bring it back up to City Council for further comments or follow-up questions Would anyone like to go first? Normally, I would also entertain a motion, but for the purposes of our discussion to perhaps try to define the contours of such a motion, if there is one that is forthcoming, let's give everyone a chance, perhaps not just 1 minute, but 2 minutes to talk on some follow-up thoughts here. Would anyone like to go first? Councilmember Willie.
Okay, not that I'm eager to go first, but let's keep things moving. So realistically, we're not here to block. I'm not here to block anything. I'm here to ensure our community is being heard and that we're doing everything we can to address their concern. Those two pictures that were shown earlier about all these light poles that could in fact have cells on them versus 1,000-foot spacing between. I live in Rancho. I believe there's 1,200 houses in Rancho. And from that picture, 4 cells would leave 1 dead zone in the middle, or 5 cells would cover the entire area at 1,000-foot distance. Los Altos has 1,500 feet. So those 5 cells might even go to 3. But how do we get there? We need to task staff to go and do their homework on these things. Yes, they can go and look at the FCC rules and say the FCC says this, says that. That's the end of the story. No, it's not. Los Altos, I'm sure, did not just pull those numbers out of the air. I'm sure they went to technical people and asked for guidance. And we should go to Los Altos and ask, who are those individuals that they got guidance from? We should do the same thing with Palo Alto. I would like to be able to say a few more things, so I hope we come back to us. This is a very important topic.
Thank you, Councilmember Willie. Next, we have Councilmember Way.
Okay, so I think we can agree, even the residents are agreeing that this is not about whether we want 5G or not. It is how we want it and what's the process and what are the guidelines. And as far as I understand, guidelines and ordinances, they have the same enforcement. It's just the flexibility of revising it. So, and I do have a couple questions after I hear the experts. I'm a little confused. We're talking about small cell 5G. Why is 4G mixing there? Like some is 4G, some is 5G. That's, I think I need some answers on that. The other answer is, I see this category 3, if you have 30, 25, 20, 30, 40 feet, which are the category 1 and 2 sites? I don't think I see that. So those are my 2 questions. And my guideline is, we're here to solve the issues. And I think the residents agree with us. We're not going to get rid of 5G. It's how we are going to satisfy the 5G implementation so we can have 5G in our city, but also work into flexibility and the process.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Way. You have a minute left. Did you want staff to answer your questions at this point?
If they have the answers now, because I sort of understand 5G, you need to get close, but 4G, you can have a distance. So I don't understand why they are mixing it up.
Okay, great. Chad, do you have a ready answer for that?
Yeah, with respect to 4G, 5G, even 3G, these are all different languages. People still have phones that only communicate 3G. Most of us have phones that communicate 4G at this point in time, and maybe a few of us have 5G. So the reason for putting in a 4G and 5G connection is so that it can serve both phones that only have 4G as well as those that have potentially 4G and 5G. We are slowly transitioning out of 3G into 4G, and over the years to come, we'll probably be slowly transitioning into 5G. It's just a progression of the languages.
Right.
With respect to category 1 and 2 sites, category 1 sites are all in non-residential zones, like along Stevens Creek Boulevard, De Anza. Category 2 sites are basically residential zones, any poles that are located in residential zones. And then category 3 sites are just those poles in residential zones that are maybe close, are in close proximity to houses or other factors.
Okay, great. I'm going to cut you off there so that we can get to our next council member, Vice Mayor Chow.
First I have some question. The staff report says that the city currently has master agreement with 5 entities, and AT&T, Comcast, Cell, Externet, Mobility, and Verizon. And as I understand, we do have T-Mobile in our area, Sprint, and there might be more. So what are these master agreements for? Are they required for any applicant?
Okay, and that was a question for staff. So I guess you're answering the questions, Chad.
Yes, so the city has been requiring that any applicants who want to install small cells, that they acquire a master license agreement before doing so, if that helps to answer your question.
So what's the agreement for? Does that, for example, include a master plan that they roll out master plan for the next 2 years, for example? What's the advantage of having a master agreement?
So the master license agreement has certain legal terms and obligations, indemnities, various other terms of the agreement. Doesn't necessarily have a master plan in there. It's just more about regulating small cells and ensuring that we have the proper legal documentation to permit those and ensure that we can remove them if we need to.
So any applicant will need a master agreement before they apply for any permit.
That is correct.
Okay, that's okay. Another question is
30
regarding
seconds.
new poles. So if we install, as I understand, we are replacing the entire pole anyway. So what if we identify sites in commercial zones for more new poles? How is that more costly for the applicants?
It's not more costly at this point in time. All of the existing poles where these facilities are being replaced are being placed. The existing poles and foundations are typically coming out, and they're putting in new ones. So there would not typically be any new costs associated with that, or they would be relatively minor.
Okay, that's time. Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so one of the comments that I would kind of like to summarize is that we seem to have guidelines which make it seem as though the residents of Cupertino are somehow inferior to the residents of communities around us, and that's pretty troubling. I would have liked to have seen an ordinance table. We were given the links to the ordinances for various cities, but I would like to see an ordinance table showing the distance between towers, distance from the house to the poles, distance from playgrounds to the poles. And I know the staff understands which cities already are experiencing litigation. I would like to know who's done what, and then what was the consequence, what happened there. I want to know what the existing fiber optic layout is specifically for Verizon, because when I went and looked at that pole today, it looked like they have every intention to string a line in the back yards of people's house. With regards to satellites, both Starlink is putting up internet satellites, and Amazon has now jumped into that pool. And I am concerned that we are essentially, we're looking at a competition for the home internet customer, and we are being competed for. With regards to aesthetics, Palo Alto limits the size of the small cell. I would like to know why we're not doing that. And lastly, we have houses getting removed and rebuilt. We have 4,500 units coming our way that we need to find locations for. So there is the potential that while you're looking at the distance to a house that's existing now, that house is going to be torn down and it will be moved to the maximum, or I should say the minimum distance to the street, the minimum setback. And we may find that state housing law starts impacting our setback requirements that we're even having now. So 20 feet might become 10 feet in the future. We don't know what's happening. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilmember Moore. Okay, so I'm going to start my clock here on 2 minutes. Okay, so I think a little bit of context would be a good idea here. So we're in 2021 right now. This is actually our second, if you want to call it, significant go around on the idea of small cell sites. We actually had a very significant go around about 4 years ago in 2017. This is a tall order, but I'm going to try to consolidate various things like industry pressures, motivations, and things that we can be doing to push back to make for hopefully a better product. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And maybe some people will remember this. There was a Senate bill proposed 649 back in 2017, and there were serious issues with regard to the question of whether this particular legislation should pass, because it essentially divested authority from the counties and the cities, right? Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop share. It divested authority from the localities to approve these, right? And so there was a grassroots push throughout the entire state, and the grassroots, the citizenry said, look, we need our local authority. Plus, if you look at the kind of natural conclusion of what would kind of happen with regard to, losing our ability to regulate, yes, this is a type of facility that could be made. Now, I only have 25 seconds, so I guess I'll just dedicate it to basically say that the first go around, I thought, having sat through it, was good in most senses. It was good in that I think our staff, actually did a good job with regard to figuring out what would be aesthetically, cohesive. There's a TB continued here as well, because we're in the middle of an ongoing process. So those are my comments initially. All right, so would anyone like to bring forth a motion at this point, having heard and kind of consolidated everyone's initial sentiments? Vice Mayor Chow?
I'll bring a motion. Okay, so I'll bring a motion with the following revised amendments, I guess. First, I would like to see a resolution, and on top of resolution, we can always have guidelines that might provide more detail in terms of implementation. And second, I would like the city to look at installing new poles in commercial areas, because we have heard from residents that there are actually better locations in commercial area. And as we know now that the cost is about the same. So that should be the first priority. And then third, I'd like to see the duration of the permit clarified, that they have to start construction within 6 months, otherwise the permit will be revoked. Language like those. And then they should start paying for the fees if they renew after 6 months, so that people will not be holding such permits forever. And that's third. Fourth is I'd like to see final categories. Let's add a category 4 for sites that's within 40 feet, and category 5 for sites that's within 20 feet. And then for any sites that's in category 4, it would require a public meeting and final approval by the Planning Commission. For category 5 sites, we would require a Planning Commission and City Council approval. This ensures that we have more transparent public process. And then fifth is more transparency on the siting analysis, because we have heard from so many residents that how are the decisions determined. I'd like to see they should establish that category 1, 2, 3 and other alternative sites within 1,000 feet are not feasible. And they should establish that the denial of a small cell site in one of these locations deprive the carrier of its right under the current law. And they should provide documentation with a small cell permit application that a closer site is that meet their service need is not feasible. It's their duty to provide such document. And number 6, wish to require a master plan on their rollout plan if they submit 10 or more permits within a year. And number 7, I'd like to see the following in the letter of notification. This is from the Campbell guideline, that the city will act on the application with or without public hearing, depending on the site, and then whether how any interested party would appeal the city's decision. Right now, I don't think we disclose the appeal process to the residents. And second, the letter should state, should include a statement that FCC requires the city to take final action within 60 or 90 days, the shot clock. The residents should know that. And then there should be a statement that the appeals shall not be permitted based on health reasons. So just so that people are aware the current law. And that's all. So
would anyone like to second Vice Mayor Chow's motion?
So I'll second it. And
okay, Councilmember Willie seconds Vice Mayor Chow's motion, and I'll take hands with regard to discussion. Councilmember Willie, you have your hand up, followed by Councilmember Moore.
So I'd like to, I guess, say a friendly amendment adding to what Vice Mayor Chow said. For our surrounding communities that have other more appropriate or resident-focused rules, that our city staff take each one that we ask about, and they give a response as to why it could or could not be used for Cupertino. I mentioned Los Altos, 1,500 feet between poles. Palo Alto has a requirement. Applicant must host a community meeting at a time and location. Why that can't be used in Cupertino when we have residents that are concerned. So I would like to suggest a friendly amendment that we give our questions to staff, and staff provide answers to each of the questions that we provide.
Okay, Councilmember Willie, if I understand your friendly amendment, it is to add a requirement in the notice, and I don't want to misstate your request, but it seems that you are asking for a mechanism for the public to ask questions of staff and to have those questions. Is that correct, or can you restate your friendly amendment?
Yeah. So Vice Mayor Chow listed the 7 items that would be included in a resolution. While staff is creating that resolution, I would like staff to answer our questions. We don't have time tonight. If we had time tonight, I'd put my questions out. But we will put in our questions, and when they come back with their resolution, they answer our council question.
Okay, I understand what your friendly amendment is. So you want to add staff direction to staff to answer questions from council on this topic. And do you have a time by which you would want council to submit those questions to staff?
I would say this Friday, but let's give other council a little bit longer, a week from Friday.
Okay, so questions submitted by the 30th of April, let's say to the city clerk. So you would like to have those answered, and what do you think a reasonable amount of time for staff to provide those answers would be?
Well, I would say the first target would be when they have the resolution ready, because then based on those answers, we might add to the resolution. I try not to delay things, You know, if they come back and give us valid reasons why something couldn't be added, okay, then we'll move on. But at least we've done due diligence to our community's concerns.
Okay, I understand your answer to be that you would like those answers provided by the time a draft resolution is available. And so I'm taking that to mean by the time, if this motion passes, this comes back on an agenda and materials are published with that agenda. Is that fair?
That's fair. Sounds
Okay.
great.
All right. So Vice Mayor Chow, will you accept Councilmember Willie's friendly amendment to your motion?
Yes.
Okay, and I assume Councilmember Willie, but for the sake of the formality, that you will accept the second as the friendly amendment.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the table that has been amended. And would Councilmember Moore, you like to go next on the comments?
Okay, so when I look at the agenda, it says consider recommending that an ordinance regulating small cell installation be prepared for adoption. So to me, we've now switched, I can't tell under item 1, it says resolution and regulation. Would the Vice Mayor like to clarify if you are not suggesting an ordinance, what specifically are you looking for here?
I'm not suggesting everything should be in this resolution. So it's possible some more details could be in the guideline. For example, what language to include in a letter. That kind of detail could be in a guideline.
Okay.
Okay. But then like the appeal process, then should be in a resolution.
Okay, I have a question.
I think the staff can decide that. I'm not trying to decide. I think staff probably.
Okay, let me interject here. So Councilmember Moore's question had to do with the fact that in the description of the agenda item, there is a reference to an ordinance, Vice Mayor Chow, and your motion addresses a resolution. And so are you, in addition to recruiting the mechanism of an ordinance, I'm sorry, strike that, the mechanism of a resolution, in addition to the existing guideline mechanism, are you amenable to introducing the notion of ordinance change to your motion?
Yeah.
Okay, and Councilmember Willie, well, okay, let me back up and formalize this. Councilmember Moore, will you put that forward as a friendly amendment to Vice Mayor Chow's motion?
Well, there's a little bit more that I was interested in having for information, and I'm not sure if Councilmember Willie's question, request, and response would address that, but I want to know.
Okay, so let's make that, let's just compile a list of friendly amendments that you would propose. So is it fair to say that adding the concept of an ordinance into point 1 that Vice Mayor Chow has up on the screen is the first part of your proposed friendly amendment?
Right, that satisfies the issue of what we agendized. Sure.
Okay, great. Okay. And now you want to speak to the modification made by Councilmember Willie?
If I may, Mayor and Councilmember Moore, just to point out council certainly can do an ordinance, but I point out that the agenda is provide input and consider recommending an ordinance. So I believe that a resolution would fall under the provide input as well as recommending an ordinance. So I just didn't want you to feel that you were legally constrained there. Okay. I think so you have both options under the Brown Act.
So we're recommending essentially we can look at either. Okay, and
that's correct.
So it could be informed. We can be informed for the pluses and minuses of doing either of those. So with regards to the additional information, I want to see the existing fiber optic layout, particularly of Verizon. My concern is that the intention is to run some of those lines above ground. And I've explained why I have that impression. And I want to know also how Verizon intends to run the lines to all of these poles in the city. And with regards to aesthetics, I would like to see the Palo Alto limit on the small cell sizing, because they have a section on that. Also, with regards to Palo Alto, just to comment on it, they mixed it up. They had some ordinance parts and then they had the guidelines part. So we possibly want to look into that mixture, and there might be some very concrete elements that belong in an ordinance and some more flexible items that belong in the guidelines. And I did want to have the table showing essentially each city, what their rules are, who's in litigation. So, and really basic on the rules: distance to the houses, distance to the playgrounds and the schools. And then I think that it is actually a pretty valid point that we have setbacks now for our structures, but what we're looking at is existing structures and distances to the poles. So I personally think we need to actually look at what our current setback rules are, because of the coming density that we have. It will be moving the structures up to the street to the minimums. And I think that while we're looking at some of our 1,500 square foot homes today are going to turn into 3,500 square foot homes or quadplexes tomorrow. And that's going to alter this image that we're looking at right now and these distances. So we're going to be looking at a different picture.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. And I basically bucketized your comments into two categories. One category I think could, if we confer a bit with staff at this point, can be accepted as having been folded in by Councilmember Willie's original friendly amendment. And I think with regard to your request for a table and what the rules are in those cities and what the litigation existing in those cities is about, I think if staff can agree that would be considered a follow-on consistent with Councilmember Willie's friendly amendment asking for information, then I think we can put that into that bucket. Is that something, I do see a couple of heads nodding, at least from staff. Would anyone from staff like to speak to that? Is that, or do you think that we would need to specifically addend the existing motion in order to capture that request?
I don't think so. I think that falls within the intent of Councilmember Willie's, answer questions.
Okay, wonderful.
Follow-up information.
Thank you, City Manager Fung. And so we do have a request from Councilmember Moore as well. However, with regard to the existing fiber optic layout of a particular company, in this case Verizon, and how Verizon intends to run lines to the poles, I think this is kind of a similar bucket. But I think what we need to do to commit to following up on this is to say, well, we will attempt to follow up, but we don't control a private stakeholder, a private company. And so is that something that we can commit to ask the company for that information? Or would you suggest a different way of trying to get at that request? Okay, as a primary question, would that also fall under Councilmember Willie's friendly amendment material as a follow-on question that we would just provide you by the end of next week?
I would think so.
Okay, so I'm saying great. So you're a yes, the head nod from our city attorney, wonderful. And with regard to the commitment to get the information, Councilmember Moore, I don't think we have much choice here, right? Because this is a private entity. I don't know what the specific requirements are in our municipality, and so maybe that's something that we can ask. Maybe Chad, you can speak to that with regard to, do we have knowledge of the existing fiber optic layout and this particular company's intention to run lines to poles, if any?
We don't have any master future plan for Verizon's network expansion. I can ask the question if they're willing to provide that. What I can provide are potentially plans of existing fiber optic that's been constructed, because we have that information, so we could potentially show the existing network layouts. But I can't commit to being able to show any future information at this point in time without further investigating it.
So, but I guess you could commit to best efforts to get that information if this motion passes and we come back. So I'm saying not. And Councilmember Moore, you have your hand raised on that point.
Okay, thank you. My concern is that we do have this aesthetics portion, and my concern is that they may in the future come back and ask to string lines up in the air on the poles, and now you have an aesthetic issue that is continued. And then when I look at the pole that was worked on in my neighborhood, like I mentioned, they removed the sidewalk. We had public testimony that they had shrubbery taken out. So there is some aesthetic issues that go beyond simply putting this 5-foot item on the top of the pole. So they had to do the sidewalk. They added 2 larger vaults than I have seen locally. Two vaults went in the planning area, so that removes some landscape space in the parkway strip. And then, like I mentioned before, they ran the tubing up the side of the power pole, and it extends out into the air with nothing, no line, no fiber optic line attached to it. And that, so there is more to just putting one of these poles in than simply putting the item on the top. So there, and especially with regards to stringing more lines through the neighborhood, which to me, it kind of defeats this whole purpose. If they're stringing a line through the backyards, they're doing the same as Comcast or AT&T, which is providing our service right now.
Okay, and so Councilmember Moore, I think that gets us to the second bucket with regard to how I was categorizing your comments. You also made a comment with regard to this to aesthetics, that perhaps we should take a look at limits on size based upon an aesthetic requirement. And so, when I heard that, I think that's substantive, and it's a request that either this ordinance or resolution or set of guidelines or some mix of the three address that particular point, which to me sounded substantive. And certainly aesthetics, nobody disputes that that is within the regulatory ambit of our jurisdiction. And so on this topic, and so what I would do is categorize your substantive item to a request for an actual addition to the motion on the table. And I would just put it under the category of aesthetics with respect to the size of the facilities and with respect to perhaps some of the design of the facilities, and in particular as relates to the potential of running a fiber optic line up to the facility itself. So is that a fair representation of your requests here? Because basically I see follow-ups that could be put into questions, and I see this aesthetic this aesthetic related item as being something that we would probably want to add to the motion to capture what your comment is there.
Okay, well, Mayor Paul, thank you for that. I don't know if the public, because there's a lot of other concerns that they have about these towers, that enough has been said about what it looks like to have one of these placed in a neighborhood. I find them awkward looking. They're quite tall, and it makes the light pole look pretty top heavy. And I personally don't like the look of it. And for me, the aesthetics it's just not working. So yes, I think you've captured what I have to say about that adequately. Thank you.
Okay, great. And so let me ask Vice Mayor Chow whether you will accept that as a friendly amendment to your motion as well, particularly with regard to the aesthetic considerations that were identified by Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
And Councilmember Willie, will you accept that as the seconder?
Sure. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Let me go. I haven't gone yet on this post motion. And so Although actually I saw Councilmember Way with your hand up. Forgive me, I don't specifically recall if you've made a comment after the motion was made. Councilmember Way, did you, I know you made a comment earlier, but I was
Not yet, but you can go, Mayor.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
so I was just making some, and I think actually the motion on the table is reasonable. It's not putting anything in abeyance right now. And I think that it is reasonable to look at something as significant as this rollout. I mean, just to be very frank and honest about it, you know, I'm someone just from a personal original position that would support the rollout of this technology, and having been with this issue for the last several years, and seeing the initial iteration of this, or at least the last one, with the state bill, as well as the efforts made by our staff. You know, I think it's from my perspective, it's a vast improvement over where we're looking at. But I also acknowledge the fact that, you know, irrespective of what industry you're talking about, industries push, you know, and, you know, we don't need to put anyone in the corner or demonize anyone. You know, literally everyone here tonight is doing their job and playing their role within a good and highly functional democracy. So that's great. But what I did hear from the public that I thought was pretty compelling, and I think this will just, you know, kind of fold into a request. And so if I can maybe see a couple of nods from, you know, the staff, that'd be great. The comment from the member of our public, Nori, talking about, hey, can we look at RF limits in other countries? And she named a few and compare those. I'll go back to the video of this meeting and list that out, so you don't have to. But if we can commit to folding that into the questions that we'll ask by the end of next week, and having those answers by the time, if we, you know, come back to council with some mixture of ordinance and resolution and guidelines, then I'd be happy just to make that comment and move on. Does that work for everyone, you know, with regard to, you know, potential staff follow-up here?
Oh, we could provide that as an informational item. Of course, council can't set regulations based upon that, but we could provide that information. I believe I see our city engineer nodding that we should be able to track that down.
Yeah, no, it's just a request to, you know, find that information and to provide it. And so that's
yes,
the limit of it. I'm
that.
not asking for it to be incorporated into, I'm not saying that, you know, our federal requirements should be usurped by our city in favor of what another country is doing. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I'll go to Councilmember Way, since you haven't had a chance to initially comment on the motion as it sits on the table.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. So I just want to understand, the motion on the table is for the staff to go back and work on it, answer our questions before a certain date, and then come up with a guideline or a ordinance recommendation. Is that what we're doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, how I read the motion on the table, you know, there's a list of items, right? And numbers, I believe 8 right now, that we'd like to see considered for a prospective mix of ordinance, resolution, and perhaps modified guidelines. And so what I would see as the next visit, and if it's not feasible, then, you know, absolutely interject and let us know. But what I would see as the next visit to our jurisdictional body is that we would see this on an agenda, and staff will have had the time to work on it and consider and, you know, answer the questions, as well as to put forward a palette of options, right? And so as these things go, there's always some recommended action, right? And so based upon what we're saying and what they're hearing from the public as well as council, and presumptively, you know, I don't demonize this either. You know, there are private actors. They, you know, have the task of effectuating these things. It's open. It's a communicative process. So we don't need to, you know, kind of make it a boogeyman or anything. So presumptively having those conversations and trying to see, you know, what's possible, what's amenable. Hopefully, we have sounded like and have been a reasonable community. You know, over the course of time and this evening. And nothing I'm hearing really is, outlandish. So I think that could result in a good set of conversations and the next visit in front of council being just an agenda item on this, very similar to what you see for the other ordinances and resolutions we've been considering thus far this term.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. So I have two questions. The first one is we are, Mayor Chow, on the, because it went out so fast, on the resolution, or is we're gonna make category 4 and 5. Instead of 1, 2, 3, we're gonna go make it 4 and 5.
That is a request, yes. And again, I mean, understanding procedurally within the scope of where we sit right now, we're not voting to effectuate this. We're voting to ask staff to go back, look into it, and make recommendations on an agenda item in the future. If upon research, basically the answer to any of these items is, well, look, this is just straight up infeasible, and here's why, or this is possible, you might want to modify X, Y, and Z, then that's what we're essentially directing staff if we vote affirmatively on this motion to go back and look into.
So Mike, I don't know if I can still add something to it, but I think I would like to go back to our original base is we are going to make this work for the 5G layout and also satisfy what we're requiring right now. So I would like to put it in there that the process or the requirements, that the goal is to make sure we actually push out this 5G in a sensible way.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can probably incorporate that into. I think. I mean, if you have particular language that you would like to add.
Okay, maybe we can state it to actually, because the stakeholders are the residents and the city and also the companies. So I think we also need to sensibly consult with the companies to make sure it's sensible, it's workable. I mean, what we'll look is solutions that can be worked on.
How about we add the word feasible, Councilmember White, after sensible? Sensible, feasible, and transparent small cell rollout.
Yeah, feasible.
Would that work for you?
That would be great. Thank you, Mayor.
So Vice Mayor Chow, feasible right there where you have it? Okay, wonderful. Okay, and Vice Mayor Chow, I assume since you're changing the language of it, you are amenable to that friendly amendment?
Yeah.
And
so I do have two more things to mention that I forgot.
Okay, let me just get to Councilmember Willie procedurally. Are you okay with that language change, Councilmember Willie, as the second?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, Vice Mayor Chow, you're up.
Okay, so I forgot to mention that the consistency with playground and schools. I would like to see a consistent standards with playground and schools, so that we are, because it's true that people actually spend more time in their home. So that it should be under the category, so that we are not separating playground and schools. We treat them the same as residential homes. And then another thing I'd like to add, I forgot to mention, is I see that I think Los Altos has this. All applications should be posted on the website when it's deemed complete. I think they have like a few days after it's complete, something like that. So it's more transparent. And the third thing, I think as I was going through this very fast, and I didn't really mention, so I would like for the city to consider new light pole sites in commercial sites, but also parks and any of the city sites, like city park lot and other city-owned properties. So we should really be proactive identifying new sites that's not on the existing light poles. And residents mentioned that when there were overhead power lines, somehow that's prohibiting small cell equipment on commercial sites. That's resolve that issue rather than say just no, it cannot go there. So let's find out what might work for when there is such issue on commercial sites. So in all, I had proposed 7, right? And then this one is from John Whaley, number 8. And number 9, stronger aesthetic requirements and the potential of updating fiber optic lines from Councilmember Moore. And then 10 and 11 is just what I have just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor Chow and Councilmember Woolley. Will you accept those modifications to Vice Mayor Chow's motion?
Yes, very good additions.
Okay, great. So we, and Vice Mayor Chow, we can,
sorry, the title is already modified. So
right, and that was through Councilmember Way's suggestion. Yeah. So yeah, and we can clean up some of the, you know, some of the typo stuff, right? Aesthetics has an A instead of an E.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. But I think you've done a really good job of setting forth the motion itself. Thank you for committing that to writing and sharing it. Are there any other comments at this point? I see Vice Mayor Chow, your hand is still up.
Oh, no.
And Councilmember Way.
I have one question on number 5.
Okay.
I've got to ask. It says that denial of a small cell site is in one of those areas deprives the carrier of its rights under federal and state law. Is that lawful? Is that something we can put in there?
Yeah, the staff report says that a jurisdiction could have grounds to deny a specific placement if there is reasonable alternative location available. So then we are asking them to kind of establish that the one they are requesting that's beyond 1, 2, 3, that's they, if we don't permit them, it will deprive them of.
I don't quite get it. Why would it deprive of their?
Okay, let me just jump in here. So, Councilmember Way, the request is just to consider a requirement that if an application is going to be denied, that the applicant in its application would say, presumably preemptively, that if you jurisdiction, if you the city deny this site, this is actually deprivation of the applicant's rights under federal and state law. So as I understand Vice Mayor Chow's proposal here, it's just adding this requirement that if the applicant is making that assertion, that if you deny it, that this is, you know, violating state or federal law, that they simply give a basis. What is your basis that this is a violation of state and federal law? So I think it's not an actual denial as described here that Vice Mayor Chow is asking for. It's that we put forward something that asks the applicant to state their basis that this denial prospectively, if it happens, is in violation of federal or state law. Does that help clarify it?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Okay, great. So next we have Councilmember Woolley, followed by Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, just one last comment, and that is, you know, we've got Verizon joining the meeting, and not just Verizon, but, you know, to all of them. Just a final comment, you know, we're not here to stop it. We're not here to block it. We're here to make sure that something of this magnitude is worked within the community and set it up for success for the cell company, but for success of the residents. And then it's a win-win situation. And, you know, I just can't say that enough, that we're here to do the best we can for the community and make things possible. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Woolley, and we have Councilmember Moore and Vice Mayor Chow. Your hand is still up as well.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
It's just here is a table. The reason I picked 40 is because it would have precluded 68% of the poll.
Okay, no worries. So let's go to Councilmember Moore at this point.
Okay, thank you. By the way, with regards to this table, I was curious what 50 feet would result for an answer there. But I just want to express some sensitivity to how this process has been going so far, where if one of these small cells has been proposed in a certain area and the people who live around it are able to gather a lot of signatures and bring this opposition to the city, that the city then moves it to another area. And I'm sensitive to the fact that you might have people who will then, because a virtue of not being able to gather up enough people to oppose that small cell moving to in front of their home, that it ends up being, placed there. And that concerns me about fairness and how this is going to work moving forward. And that I don't want it to be that some people end up having these placed in front of their homes by virtue of the fact that they didn't get 100 of their friends to sign a petition to not have it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. And so, seeing no other hands raised for commentary, I think.
Mayor, if I may, from the City Attorney's Office,
yes.
May I request 4 points of clarification from the motion maker to assist staff as we bring back a draft item for council to consider?
Sure, proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councilmember Chow, on your main motion, one was to include the duration of the encroachment permit that is issued, and say that if it's not constructed within 6 months, the permit may be revoked. I would like to point out that our existing encroachment permit ordinance in the Muni Code already provides that an encroachment permit is good for 90 days. If construction hasn't started before then, it will expire with the city engineer's ability to extend that. So I just wanted to let you know there's already a provision that's actually shorter than 6 months in our code. And so I was wondering if you'd feel comfortable sticking with that, or if you wanted staff to change that in some way. And if you want, we can look at that exactly, or perhaps our city engineer can describe it more closely. But so I guess I just wanted to point out that we already have something in the code. So would you like to?
Yeah, that's good. So then maybe we can just reference that.
Cross-reference the existing expirations. And great. And could the city engineer just correct me if there's anything that I've misstated about the existing code requirements?
The existing code requirement governs encroachment permits and is correct.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I will, and Councilmember Willie, are you okay with that amendment as the second to cross-reference the existing?
One brief question, and that is an encroachment permit different than building permit? In building permits, if work has not started, they get a one-time extension for another 6 months without doing any work. Is there such a provision with encroachment permits where they're allowed to request the one-time extension?
Let me bring up that exact code section so we can answer that now. Okay, notices in terms of permit. It's section 14.08.100 requires them to begin work within 90 calendar days from the date of issuance, unless a different time period is stated in the permit. If it's not commenced within a timely fashion, then the permit shall become void unless an extension of time to commence work has been granted by the city engineer. So right now it leaves the opportunity for an extension to the discretion of the city engineer. So that's how our current code is written. If you'd like amendments to that, we could, specific to small cell facilities, that could be part of your motion.
So this is your opportunity, Vice Mayor Chow. Right now the city engineer has the discretion as to whether to expand the 90 days. Would you like to provide direction in some other manner? Perhaps with, you had indicated the Planning Commission and or the City Council in one part of your motion. Do you want to modify that mechanism?
I might be able to offer a possibility, and that is, if it hasn't been commenced within the 90 days, if there was a request for an extension, the extension could be no more than additional 30 days. I mean, if weather prevented them from getting started or something, they've got 30 days to wait for the storm to pass and then start, but not starting the time period totally over again. So I would suggest, you know, an additional maximum 30-day extension.
Well, why don't we give staff?
There are practical reasons for certain extensions up to 6 months. A lot of these utility companies go through the permitting process. They've got a number of different contractors working on these: fiber, electrical, concrete, streetlight poles. They need to basically spend time to get all of those contractors in alignment before they begin work, instead of piecemealing it. Sometimes that takes a bit of time to get all those folks lined up.
Yeah, speaking of getting lined up, let me kind of bring this back here. We're at a high level right now, and understand that we have a whole mechanism for looking into, you know, these policy requests. And so what I would expect is that staff would go back, consider the ramifications of these suggestions, and come back to us with a report. And that would include the legalities of something, the practicalities of something, you know, hopefully some options based upon what you know are considerations to be. And so my request at this point, Heather, I know you said you had 3 other items, but rather than getting into a more granular discussion that is essentially
well, I actually interpreted the motion
preemptively-
to come back with a resolution, not just a report. So perhaps Councilmember Chow could clarify that. And it's certainly when we come back with a resolution. And one of my points of clarification was whether this is an ordinance or a resolution. But if the motion is indeed to come back with either a resolution or an ordinance, then we can present options and recommendations at that time. But
right.
I interpreted,
you know, I apologize for my lack of clarity there. I thought that I had stated several times that it would be some mix of ordinance or resolution.
yeah, I'm just asking for clarity
to,
from the motion maker about what her intent was and the seconder there.
Either ordinance or resolution, whichever is more appropriate.
So we would come back with that actually drafted.
Yeah, and with options, and not, of course, if something is not feasible, and the council should consider then.
So resolutions and ordinances are fairly different. So would the resolution could be a standalone, an ordinance would usually be amending the municipal code. Do you have a preference between those two?
Ordinance, I would prefer an ordinance.
And that was a question of clarification I had for Councilmember Moore as well, whether her friendly amendment was to change the motion from a resolution to an ordinance, and whether the intent was that that ordinance would be amending the municipal code. It sounds like Councilmember Chow, Vice Mayor Chow is clarifying her motion to be for an ordinance to amend the municipal code. Was that the intent of the friendly motion or friendly amendment?
Yeah, no, I you know, respectfully, I don't think you're framing this accurately. My understanding of the motion is that Vice Mayor Chow is asking for, as staff deems appropriate, to recommend some combination of ordinance, resolution, and modified guidelines. She was very explicit with regard to the conversation when we were talking about resolutions and modified guidelines, and that, you know, she would accept whatever combination was deemed most appropriate, you know, for further discussion. And then we talked about ordinances.
And staff doesn't have an opinion about whether resolution or ordinance is more appropriate. We're trying to get direction from council on that. We could draft both as options if you'd like us to do that.
Why don't you look into it because I'm imagining you probably don't have a regulatory schema framed in your mind at this point. And so for the benefit of time, prior to coming back on another agenda item, I think the direction is quite clear. There is prospectively some combination of those three. And so I think there's flexibility. Vice Mayor Chow, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's flexibility between those three mechanisms as to what would be optimal with regard to effectuating these points of your motion. Is that fair, that you're providing flexibility to staff as to what they choose in particular to prepare and provide us in an agenda item?
Yeah, staff can see that whether maybe some details might be more appropriate in a guideline, then I'm fine with that. So, because staff needs to implement it. Yeah, I'd like to add that I keep forgetting. I'd like to thank the city engineer. I mean, after looking at other cities' ordinance, I have to say that we already have a really good guideline on that. The idea of having a site, what's that called? Site identification before the shot clock even starts. So there are a lot of pretty good things already there. Yeah, we are just making something that's already very good, but we want better for our residents.
All right, so I think what I hear for the first point of clarification is you'd like some recommendations and options from staff regarding the term of the permit and potential for extensions. You would like us to consider resolution, ordinance, and guidelines and some combination of those and make a recommendation and come back with options for council to consider. And then the other point of clarification was that you had said that the ordinance or resolution would state how an interested party can appeal. Staff, it would be helpful if we had clarification on what council wanted that appeal process to be. Alternatively, we could provide options in what we bring back to council about the various appeal processes, and maybe that would also be part of this table that compares other ordinances. Should we also have that be some detail that's brought back at the subsequent meeting?
Yeah. The idea is a stronger transparency and notification as it comes closer to residential structures. So there is a degree of process, yeah. But then I'm really more interested in new sites. I think I would like us to be more proactive in identifying new locations for street poles.
I understand that. Okay, thank you, Mayor. I think, the last point was that Vice Mayor Chow amended the motion to apply consistent standards with playgrounds and schools. Consistency can be achieved by reducing playground setbacks as well as increasing residential setbacks. Are you also just looking for a staff recommendation there of how to make those consistent, or did you have a more specific, or did council have more specific direction about how to make those standards consistent?
I'm okay with staff recommendation. Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back with options on that as well.
How about John? John?
I think I'm fine with them coming back with the recommendations, and then based on that, we might, want to add more verbiage, define it a little bit, more. But at that time, I think for tonight, I think we're pretty good.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Mayor. I better understand how to bring this forward.
Excellent. Councilmember Moy, you have your hand up.
Just a really brief comment. I remember one of the residents' comment is this is not one size fits all. So I hope that staff would, when you bring back recommendations, you would pay attention. You kind of look at it. It's, I think, being flexible with solutions is much better than being rigid and come with a lot of infeasible rules. So I trust the staff would do a good research, and I just feel that we have listened to the residents. We have listened, our council did a good research on it, and the Vice Mayor Chow had a lot of good items in it. I'm hoping that I want to emphasize this is a feasible resolution or guidelines, guide, so that we can really work with the residents and roll it out so that we are in compliance with the federal law.
Okay, great. So, I'll just say before calling for the vote that, I think we're in the process of making some really good laws this year. We took our time with bird safe and dark skies, and not only did we make a really good ordinance, we also led the way. And I think the totality of this discussion tonight has been excellent on almost every level you can really slice it. And so I'm looking forward to the next step. I'll remind council that if this motion passes, set your calendar for the end of next week to get those questions into our city clerk. And, I thank everyone involved. I thank the public, as well as our council, our staff, the private enterprises, and everyone representing those viewpoints and perspectives. And I do expect that the agenda item that comes back will be a very thoughtful one. And, again, we're trying to make sure that we have the best product possible. So without further ado, Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call vote on the item and motion that's on the table?
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Wei?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Well, we started this meeting at 6:45 and we are approximately 2 hours later now. So let's take a 5-minute break until 8:45. It is 8:40 and we'll see you then. Thank you.